The cruise ship was sinking fast. Marcus Thompson watched from his small fishing boat as people jumped into the cold ocean. He was just a poor single dad trying to catch fish to pay his bills. Then he saw her, a woman in a fancy dress, drowning. In the waves. Marcus didn't think twice. He jumped in to save her. She clung to him as he pulled her to safety, not knowing she owned the very ship that was going under. In that moment, she was just someone who needed help. But what happens when a billionaire owes her life to a man who can barely afford groceries? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The harbor stirred to life as the first light of dawn painted the sky in muted grays and pale blues. Marcus Thompson's weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking the lines on his 28-foot fishing boat, the Mary Catherine. Named after his late wife, the vessel had seen better days. Paint peeled from her hull like old scabs, and the engine coughed more than it purred. But she was all he had. "Dad, you forgot your lunch again." Emma's voice carried across the quiet. Doc, his 12-year-old daughter, stood at the edge of the pier, holding a brown paper bag that she'd carefully packed the night before. Her school uniform was pressed and clean, a small miracle considering their ancient washing machine that required a firm kick to complete its spin cycle. Marcus paused in coiling a rope to look at his daughter. Even in the dim morning light, he could see Mary in her. The same determined set to her jaw, the same warm brown eyes that seemed to understand more than a child her age should. "What would I do without you, kiddo?" "Starve, probably," Emma replied with a grin that didn't quite hide her concern. She glanced at the threatening sky. "Weather report says there's a storm system moving in from the southeast." "Weather reports don't pay the rent," Marcus said, though he'd noticed the barometric pressure dropping all week. He climbed onto the dock to take the lunch bag, ruffling her hair in the process. "Besides, fish bite better when the pressure's low." Emma ducked away from his hand, smoothing her hair back into place. "Mrs. Chen says I can work extra hours at the market this weekend if you need—" "No." The word came out sharper than Marcus intended. He softened his tone. "School comes first. Always. That was the deal, remember? They'd made that promise together, standing at Mary's graveside 5 years ago. Emma had been only 7, clutching a teddy bear and trying to understand why Mommy wasn't coming home from the hospital. The cancer had taken her quickly, too quickly for a fishing boat captain with basic insurance to do anything but watch and pray. "I remember," Emma said quietly. She pulled out a folded paper from her backpack. "Got my report card yesterday." Marcus unfolded it carefully, his rough fingers gentle with the document. Straight A's lined the page with glowing comments from her teachers. Advanced reading level. Exceptional mathematical reasoning. A joy to have in class. His chest swelled with pride, even as it tightened with worry. How long could he keep this brilliant child in their ramshackle life? "There's a science fair coming up," Emma continued, trying to sound casual. "Entry fee is only $50, and Mrs. Patterson says my project idea about sustainable fishing practices could win." "We'll find the money," Marcus promised, though he had no idea how. The rent was already 2 weeks late, and the boat needed new spark plugs, but he'd learned long ago that a father's job was to make the impossible seem possible, even when the numbers didn't add up. A horn blared from the parking lot. "That's the school bus," Emma said. She hugged him quickly, her thin arms stronger than they looked. "Be careful today, Dad. Please." "Always am," he lied smoothly. They both knew that careful fishermen came home empty-handed, and empty nets meant empty stomachs. Marcus watched her run toward the bus, her backpack bouncing with each step. She turned at the door to wave, and he waved back, maintaining his smile until the bus disappeared around the corner. Then his shoulders sagged. "She's growing up fast," a gravelly voice observed. Marcus turned to find Captain Roy Hendricks preparing his own boat 2 slips down. The older man had been fishing these waters for 40 years, his face a road map of sun damage and salt spray. "Too fast," Marcus agreed, climbing back aboard the Mary Catherine. Roy spat tobacco juice into the harbor. You heading out in this weather? Bills don't pay themselves. Neither do funeral expenses. Roy's tone was matter-of-fact, rather than cruel. That system coming in is supposed to be a big one, most of the fleet's staying in today. Marcus looked at his fuel gauge, barely a quarter tank. He'd have to stay close to shore anyway. Can't afford to lose a day. Roy shook his head, but said nothing more. They'd had this conversation before in different words, but with the same meaning. Pride and desperation made for dangerous companions on the water. As Marcus fired up the Mary Catherine's reluctant engine, he thought about the $50 for Emma's science fair. $50 might as well be $500 in their current situation. But he'd seen the light in her eyes when she talked about the project, the same light Mary used to get when she discussed her nursing patients. The engine finally caught, belching black smoke before settling into an uneven rhythm. Marcus cast off the lines and eased away from the dock, pointing the bow toward the open ocean. Behind him, the city was waking up. Coffee shops opening, office workers beginning their commutes, the ordinary world spinning on its axis. He checked his equipment one more time. Nets patched but functional, ice chest ready, emergency radio tested. The life jacket hung on its hook, unused as always. Superstition or stupidity, he couldn't swim while wearing it, and swimming was sometimes the difference between reaching a net and losing it. The harbor mouth opened before him, the protected, waters giving way to deeper swells. Already he could feel the Mary Catherine working harder, her hull slapping against waves that shouldn't be this large so early in the day. But the fishing grounds waited, and somewhere beneath these churning waters swam his rent payment, Emma's science fair entry, and maybe, just maybe, enough left over to fix the washing machine. Marcus throttled up, chasing hope into the grey morning, unaware that the storm building on the horizon would bring more than wind and rain. It would bring a choice that would change everything, transforming a routine day into the first chapter of an entirely different life. 300 miles south of Marcus's struggling fishing boat, Victoria Sterling stood in the penthouse suite of the Celestial Dream, her latest and most luxurious cruise ship. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the ocean, but she wasn't looking at the water. Instead, she stared at her reflection in the polished glass, seeing a stranger staring back. At 45, Victoria had everything the world said mattered. The Sterling Cruise Line empire, built by her father from a single ferryboat, now commanded a fleet of 22 vessels and a net worth that regularly landed her on Forbes lists. Her wardrobe contained dresses that cost more than most people's. Cars. Her jewelry could fund a small school. Yet standing here preparing for another charity gala she'd rather skip, she felt as empty as the champagne flutes waiting to be filled. Mrs. Sterling? Her assistant, James, appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. The board meeting is starting in 5 minutes. Victoria turned from the window, smoothing her navy Armani suit. Tell them I'll be there in 10. James hesitated. Mr. Blackwood specifically requested 10 minutes, James. Her tone brooked no argument. Richard Blackwood, chairman of the board, could wait. He'd been her father's friend once, back when friendship meant something more than stock options and profit margins. Alone again, Victoria walked to the mantel where a silver-framed photograph held court among various awards and accolades. The picture showed a younger version of herself with her father on the deck of their first real cruise ship. She'd been 25, fresh from Harvard Business School, ready to conquer the world alongside him. 20 years later, she'd conquered it alone. You'd hate what we've become, Dad, she whispered to the photograph. William Sterling had built his company on 2 principles. Treat your employees like family and never compromise safety for profit. The first principle had died with him. The second was dying a slower death, strangled by quarterly earnings reports and shareholder demands. Her phone buzzed. A text from her ex-husband in Milan, something about their daughter Sophia needing money for university expenses. Victoria transferred the funds without reading the full message. Money was easier than conversation, cleaner than the messy emotions that had ended their marriage 8 years ago. She activated the wall-mounted screen for the video conference. 12 faces materialized, the board of directors in their various offices around the world. Richard Blackwood's jowly face dominated the center square. "Victoria, so glad you could join us," Blackwood said with false warmth. "We were just discussing the Q3 reports. Revenue is up 18%. Chief Financial Officer Martin Chen interjected, his voice tinged with satisfaction. "The cost-cutting measures you implemented are showing remarkable results." Victoria had implemented no such measures. She'd specifically rejected the proposed cuts to maintenance and crew training. "Which measures are those, Martin?" A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. "The optimization protocols we discussed. Reduced maintenance windows, skeleton crews during off-peak hours, the elimination of redundant safety drills." "I rejected those proposals." Victoria's voice could have frozen the tropical air. "I was quite clear that safety protocols were non-negotiable." Blackwood cleared his throat. "The board took a vote in your absence last month. While we appreciate your sentimental attachment to your father's policies, we have a fiduciary duty to our shareholders." "Sentimental." Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Safety regulations aren't sentimental, Richard. They're legal requirements." "Which we still exceed," Martin quickly added. "We're well within maritime law guidelines." Guidelines that were themselves minimal, Victoria knew. The cruise industry had lobbied hard to keep regulations loose, arguing that strict oversight would cripple tourism. Her father had always exceeded those guidelines by wide margins, saying a clear conscience was worth more than a fat profit margin. "I want to see the implementation reports," Victoria said. "Every change, every cut, every optimization. On my desk by tomorrow morning." "Of course," Blackwood agreed smoothly. "Now, about tonight's gala. The governor will be attending along with several potential investors from Shanghai. It's crucial that we present a united front." The rest of the meeting blurred into discussions of profit projections and expansion plans. Victoria participated on autopilot, her mind elsewhere. When had she become a figurehead in her own company? When had board meetings become battles rather than collaborations? After the call ended, she stood on her private balcony, breathing in the salt air. The Celestial Dream was a marvel of engineering, 200 feet long, 18 decks, capacity for 5,000 passengers and 2,000 crew. It was also, she was beginning to realize, a symbol of everything wrong with her life. Too big, too isolated, too removed from the simple pleasure of being on the water. Her father had started with a fishing boat, not unlike the dozens she could see dotting the horizon. He'd worked those boats himself, understanding every rivet and rope before he'd ever dreamed of building floating cities. When had she last touched actual seawater, rather than the filtered, heated perfection of an infinity? "Pool?" "Mrs. Sterling," James appeared again. "The inspection tour is scheduled for 2 p.m. Should I cancel it?" "No." Victoria made a sudden decision. "In fact, I'll do it personally." "Ma'am, I want to see every part of this ship, James. Engine room, crew quarters, maintenance bays, everything. But the gala preparations can wait." She turned from the balcony. "Have maintenance prepare for a full inspection. And James, tell them I want to see the real conditions, not a sanitized version." As her assistant hurried away, Victoria allowed herself a small smile. For the first time in months, perhaps years, she felt a spark of her old self. The woman who'd learned the business from the bottom up, who knew every job on a ship because she'd done them all herself during summer breaks from college. She changed from her suit into practical clothes, khakis and a polo shirt bearing the company logo, simple clothes that wouldn't matter if they got dirty. In the mirror, she looked younger somehow, less like a CEO and more like the woman her father had been proud to call his daughter. The inspection would ruffle feathers. Blackwood would be furious. The board would whisper about her losing her edge, going soft. Let them whisper. Something was wrong on this ship, in this company, in her life. She could feel it like a storm building on the horizon as she headed for the door. Victoria paused by her father's photograph one more time. "Help me remember why we started this," she said softly. "Help me find my way back." She didn't know that within hours she'd find her answer in the most unexpected place. In the arms of a fisherman who measured wealth not in stock portfolios, but in the love of a daughter and the courage to do what was right, regardless of the cost. The morning had not been kind to Marcus Thompson. 4 hours into his fishing expedition, his nets had yielded 3 undersized mackerel and a collection of seaweed that would make better garden fertilizer than dinner. The Mary Catherine rocked. In swells that grew larger by the hour, her protesting engine adding a worrying knock to its usual complaints. Marcus checked his fuel gauge again. Less than an eighth of a tank. He'd burned more than planned fighting the currents, which seemed determined to push him toward the shipping lanes. That was dangerous territory for a small boat, but the fish seemed to have congregated where the deep water channel created upwellings rich with nutrients. He thought about Emma as he worked, her bright face a talisman against the growing unease in his gut. She'd be in her English class now, probably devouring whatever book Mrs. Patterson had assigned, while her classmates struggled with basic comprehension. The girl read the way her mother had nursed, with complete dedication and natural talent. The wedding ring hanging on a chain around his neck caught on his raincoat zipper. Marcus freed it carefully, the metal warm against his chest despite the cold spray. Mary had placed it on his finger 15 years ago, back when they'd been young and invincible, before cancer became part of their vocabulary. "Just a few more good catches," he told the ring, the ocean himself. "Just enough to get us through the month." The radio crackled with weather updates he didn't want to hear. Small craft advisory upgrading to warning. Seas building to 15 feet. All vessels advised to seek safe harbor. Marcus turned the volume down, but not off. There was a difference between brave and stupid, though that line got blurrier when the refrigerator was empty. A distant horn made him look up. On the horizon, a cruise ship moved like a floating city, its white bulk incongruous against the darkening sky. The celestial dream, according to the lettering he could barely make out. Even from this distance, the ship looked impossibly luxurious, its multiple decks stacked like a wedding cake designed by someone with unlimited funds and questionable taste. "Must be nice," Marcus muttered, turning back to his nets. He'd never been on a cruise, never even considered it. His honeymoon with Mary had been 3 days in a cabin by the lake, and they'd counted themselves lucky for that. Meanwhile, aboard that floating palace, Victoria Sterling descended into the bowels of her pride and joy, her inspection tour revealing truths that made her stomach clench. The engine room, which should have been spotless, showed signs of deferred maintenance. Oil stains that spoke of slow leaks, rust creeping along pipes that should have been replaced months ago. The chief engineer, a competent man named Davies, tried to explain it away. "Budget constraints, ma'am," he said, not meeting her eyes. "We've had to prioritize." "Prioritize what, exactly?" Victoria ran her finger along a valve that flaked rust at her touch. "The visible areas, mostly. Guest services." The board said, "The board doesn't understand that a ship is only as strong as its weakest component," Victoria interrupted. "How long has this been going on?" Davies shifted uncomfortably. 6 months, maybe 8, since the new efficiency protocols. Efficiency. The word tasted bitter. Her father would have called it what it was, negligence dressed in corporate speak. The crew quarters were worse. Bunks stacked 3 high in spaces meant for 2. Emergency equipment showing expiration dates from last year. The crew mess serving food that Victoria wouldn't feed to a dog. These people worked 16-hour days to make passengers' dreams come true, and this was their reward. "Who authorized this?" she asked the quarters master. "It came from corporate, ma'am. Part of the optimization initiative." Victoria felt rage building, cold and focused. She'd been a fool, trusting the board while she attended galas and signed papers she barely read. Her father had built this company by walking the decks, knowing every crew member by name. When had she last done that? Back on the Mary Catherine, Marcus made a decision that would have seemed crazy an hour ago. The fish finder showed a school of something substantial right at the edge of the shipping lane. His fuel wouldn't last for another search pattern. It was now or never. He maneuvered carefully, aware that the big ships needed miles to stop or turn. The channel was technically open to all vessels, but physics favored the massive over the brave. Still, the fish were there, silver shadows on. His ancient sonar, and Emma needed that science fair entry fee. The nets went over smoothly, experience compensating for equipment that had seen better decades. Marcus watched the lines, feeling the familiar tension that meant contact with something substantial. His spirits lifted slightly. Maybe the day wouldn't be a total loss. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not the rumble of distant engines or the crash of waves, but something mechanical and wrong. A grinding, tearing noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once. He looked toward the cruise ship, now less than a mile away. Was it his imagination, or was she listing slightly to port? As he watched, a puff of black smoke erupted from her stern, followed by another, larger billow. No, Marcus breathed. He'd seen enough maritime disasters on the news to know what that smoke meant. Fire in the engine room. On a ship carrying thousands of souls, with a storm building and the nearest port hours away. He grabbed his radio, tuning to the emergency channel, but the airwaves were already crackling with distress calls. The Celestial Dream was in trouble, serious trouble, and every boat within 50 miles would be responding. But most of those boats were safely in harbour, warned away by weather that Marcus had ignored. He looked at his fuel gauge, at his tiny boat, at the massive ship that was definitely listing now. He thought of Emma, waiting for him to come home safely. Then he thought of all those people on that ship. Workers like him, just trying to make a living. Passengers who'd saved for years for this trip. Children who had no say in being there. The decision was no decision at all. Marcus Thompson hauled in his nets, dumping the catch without counting it, and turned the Mary Catherine toward the stricken vessel. He pushed the throttle forward, the engine protesting but responding. He didn't know that Victoria Sterling was at that moment fighting through smoke-filled corridors, helping evacuate passengers even as her perfect world collapsed around her. He didn't know that their lives were about to intersect in the most dramatic way possible. All he knew was that people needed help, and he had a boat. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it was everything. The explosion started small, a spark in an engine room where oil had leaked for months, meeting metal that had overheated from poor maintenance. In the hands of a properly trained crew with well-maintained equipment, it might have been contained. But budget cuts had reduced the engine room staff from 12 to 6, and the fire suppression system hadn't been properly tested since the last inspection they'd managed to dodge. Chief Engineer Davies saw it first, a bloom of orange flame, where no flame should be. His shout of warning came simultaneously with the automatic alarms, a cacophony of bells and sirens that sent his skeleton crew scrambling for extinguishers that should have been replaced last year. "Shut down engines 3 and 4, Davies commanded, but the control panel was already starting to smoke. The fire found the oil-soaked floors, racing along channels of neglect with hungry enthusiasm. "Everyone out, now!" 3 decks above, Victoria felt the ship shudder. She was in the main galley, inspecting food stores that were barely adequate when the lights flickered and that distinctive shudder ran through the Celestial Dream's massive frame. 20 years in the cruise business had taught her the difference between normal ship movement and something catastrophically wrong. "What was that?" the galley supervisor asked, but Victoria was already moving, her practical shoes slapping against the deck as she ran for the nearest emergency station. The ship's intercom crackled to life with the voice of Captain Morrison, steady despite the circumstances. "This is the captain. We are experiencing technical difficulties in the engine room. As a precaution, all passengers and crew should proceed calmly to their muster stations. Calmly. Victoria almost laughed at the word as she reached an emergency panel, yanking out a crew radio. The channels were chaos, damage reports, requests for instructions, the barely controlled panic of a situation spiraling beyond control. Through it all, she heard Davy's voice. "Fire is spreading. We can't contain it with what we have." The ship listed further, the angle now noticeable enough that unsecured items began sliding across surfaces. Victoria grabbed a handrail as her mind raced through calculations. 5,000 passengers, 2,000 crew, 20 lifeboats rated for 150 each. But when had they last been properly serviced? Through a porthole, she saw the first distress flare arc into the grey sky, a crimson scream for help that would be visible for miles. Her beautiful ship, her father's legacy, was dying. Marcus saw the flare before he heard the radio distress. Calls. The red star burst against storm clouds, followed quickly by another. His hands tightened on the wheel as he pushed the Mary Catherine harder. The old boat groaned in protest, waves breaking over her bow, but she kept moving forward. The emergency channel exploded with voices, the Celestial Dream calling Mayday, the Coast Guard responding, other vessels checking in with their positions. Most were too far away to help immediately. The nearest Coast Guard cutter was 90 minutes out, fighting the same seas that made Marcus's journey treacherous. As he drew closer, the full scale of the disaster became clear. The cruise ship's list was pronounced now, maybe 15 degrees, and increasing. Black smoke poured from her stern section, and Marcus could see the orange glow of fire through some portholes. Worse, he could see people, hundreds of them crowding the deck rails, some already going over the side in life jackets. The lifeboats were launching, but something was wrong. Some wouldn't release properly, hanging at crazy angles. Others descended too fast, spilling passengers into the churning sea. The efficiency protocols had claimed their due. Crews untrained in proper emergency procedures, equipment maintained just enough to pass casual inspection, but not enough to function when lives depended on it. Victoria fought through tilting corridors toward the boat deck. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the angle of the floor made walking treacherous. She helped an elderly couple who'd become disoriented, practically carrying the woman while her husband clung to her other arm. "This way!" she shouted over the alarms. "Stay together!" They reached muster station C to find chaos. The crew member supposedly in charge was a boy of maybe 19, trained to serve cocktails, not coordinate evacuations. He stood frozen as passengers pushed and shoved, fear overcoming the thin veneer of civilization. Victoria handed the elderly couple to another passenger and grabbed the boy's whistle, blowing 3 sharp blasts. "Listen to me!" Her voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "Women and children to the front. Men help them board. Anyone who pushes will be removed from the line." Order emerged from chaos, tentatively at first, then with growing cooperation. Victoria worked alongside the terrified crew, her designer clothes now stained with smoke and sweat. She helped load lifeboat after lifeboat, staying calm even as the list increased and the smoke thickened. It wasn't until the last boat at her station was away that she realized the truth. She'd sent away her own escape route, and the remaining lifeboats were on the high side of the list, impossible to launch safely. Around her, perhaps 200 people remained, crew mostly, and passengers who'd helped with the evacuation. Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom one last time. "All remaining personnel to the boat deck. Prepare for water evacuation. Water evacuation. Corporates speak for jump and hope for the best." Marcus brought the Mary Catherine as close as he dared. The size difference was absurd, his boat like a toy next to the dying giant. But he could see people in the water, some in life jackets, others clinging to debris. The sensible thing would be to pick up survivors and get clear before the celestial dream rolled completely. Instead, he maneuvered closer, fighting wind and waves and the suction of the sinking ship. His radio crackled. "Small vessel, this is. Coast Guard, maintain safe distance from the vessel." Marcus ignored them. Safe distance wouldn't save the people he could see preparing to jump from the tilting deck. He grabbed every life ring, cushion and floating object on his boat, hurling them towards swimmers. His own life jacket remained on its hook. He'd need mobility if he went in the water. That's when he saw her. A woman in what had once been elegant evening wear, helping others to the rail, making sure they jumped clear. Even from this distance, he could see she was exhausted, moving on pure will. She turned to help one last person, a young crew member who was paralyzed with fear. The ship lurched. The angle increased dramatically, and the woman lost her footing. She slid down the tilting deck, caught the rail, held on for a moment that stretched like eternity. Then the railing gave way. Marcus watched her fall, the dark dress billowing, like wings that couldn't quite carry her. She hit the water hard and didn't resurface. He didn't think. Thinking would have reminded him about fuel levels and Emma and the stupidity of one more life against all the others. He simply acted, diving from the Mary Catherine into the brutal sea. The Atlantic hit Marcus like a frozen sledgehammer. Even in summer, these waters carried the memory of Arctic currents, and the shock nearly drove the air from his lungs. He forced himself to focus, scanning the chaotic surface for any sign of the woman in the dark dress, there, a flash of fabric 20 yards away, disappearing beneath a wave. Marcus swam harder than he'd ever swum before, his fishing-strengthened arms pulling him through swells that tried to drive him back. Salt water burned his eyes and throat, but he kept them open, searching. She was sinking. The elegant gown that had looked so beautiful on deck now acted as an anchor, its waterlogged fabric dragging her down. Marcus dove, the pressure squeezing, his ears as he kicked deeper. His fingers found silk, then an arm. He pulled, but the dress fought him, its weight tremendous. Victoria's eyes were closed, her body limp. Marcus made a desperate decision, using his knife to cut through the dress's heavy skirt. The fabric parted reluctantly, and suddenly she was lighter, manageable. He kicked for the surface, his lungs screaming for air. They broke through together, Marcus gasping while supporting Victoria's head above water. She wasn't breathing. Around them, the sea was full of survivors and debris, the celestial dream, groaning its death song as it listed past 45 degrees. "Come on," Marcus muttered, tilting her head back, clearing her airway. "Don't you dare give up." A wave crashed over them, driving them under again. Marcus held tight, protecting her, as best he could, while fighting back to the surface. When they emerged, she coughed, a weak, sputtering sound, but the most beautiful thing he'd ever heard. Victoria's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and terrified. She thrashed weakly, panic overtaking reason. "Easy!" Marcus shouted over the wind. "I've got you! Stop fighting!" Something in his voice reached her. She stilled, letting him support her weight. Her lips were already turning blue from the cold, and Marcus knew they had minutes, not hours. The Mary Catherine had drifted in the current, but Marcus could see her distinctive blue hull 50 yards away. It might as well have been 50 miles. His strength was fading, the cold seeping into his bones. But Emma's face flashed in his mind. He would not leave his daughter orphaned. "Can you kick?" he asked Victoria. She nodded weakly, and together they began the torturous journey back to his boat. Every stroke was agony, every wave a mountain to climb. Other survivors called for help, and the sound tore at Marcus's conscience, but he couldn't save everyone. He could barely save the woman in his arms. A life ring floated past, one he'd thrown from his boat. Marcus grabbed it, looping it under. Victoria's arms. It gave them just enough extra buoyancy to make the difference. Stroke by stroke, they closed the distance. The Mary Catherine's ladder had never looked so beautiful or so impossibly high. Marcus pushed Victoria up first. his numb hands barely able to grip. She crawled over the rail and collapsed on deck. He followed, his body operating on pure will. For a moment, they lay gasping like landed fish. Then Marcus forced himself up. All around them, people struggled in the water. His boat was small, but it was here, and it was floating. "Help me," he croaked to Victoria, grabbing boat hooks and ropes. She struggled to her feet, the remains of her dress clinging to her frame. Without hesitation, she took a boat hook and helped him pull the nearest survivor aboard, a young man in a crew uniform. Then another, and another. The Mary Catherine sank lower with each person saved. Marcus watched his waterline disappear, felt the sluggish response of an overloaded hull. His fuel gauge touched empty, the engine coughing. "We can't take more." A man in a business suit said, "You'll sink us all." Marcus ignored him, pulling a woman and child from the water. Victoria was right beside him, her expensive manicure shredded, her arms trembling with exhaustion, but still reaching for the next person. "That's 30, someone counted. 30 people on a boat, meant for 6. The engine died." Marcus tried. The starter, nothing. They were dead in the water, overloaded and drifting, but they were alive. Victoria looked around at the people crammed on every surface. Her eyes met Marcus's, and in them he saw not the wealthy woman who'd fallen from a cruise ship, but someone who understood what mattered. She was shivering violently, her lips purple, but she managed a nod of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus pulled off his raincoat, wrapping it around her shoulders. It was a useless gesture. They were both soaked through, but she clutched it like armor. In the distance, the celestial dream gave a sound like a dying whale. The great ship rolled past the point of no return, her hull rising like a breaching creature before sliding beneath the waves. The suction pulled debris and swimmers in a terrible whirlpool. Marcus held the wheel of his powerless boat, watching his compass spin wildly. They were at the mercy of wind and current now. 31. Souls in a vessel designed for afternoon fishing trips. The storm that had been building all day chose that moment to announce itself properly, the first real rain lashing across the deck. Victoria pressed against him, seeking warmth neither of them had to give. Around them the survivors huddled together, processing the horror of what they'd witnessed. Some cried, others stared at nothing, a few prayed in various languages. "Coast Guard's coming," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure they'd find them in these seas. His emergency radio was working barely, but their position was drifting with every wave. "You saved us," Victoria said. Her voice was different now, stripped of whatever polish money provided. "You risked everything." Marcus thought of Emma, probably hearing about the disaster at school, not knowing her father was in the middle of it. "Couldn't just watch," he said simply. A wave larger than the rest crashed over the bow, drenching everyone anew. The Mary Catherine wallowed, taking on water. Marcus grabbed a bucket, Victoria grabbed another, and without needing to be told, others began bailing. It was absurd, bailing the ocean with buckets. But it was action, and action was better than despair. As they worked, Marcus caught Victoria's eye again. Despite everything, the cold, the fear, the loss of her ship, she was bailing with determination. He didn't know her name. She didn't know his. But in that moment, they were simply two people trying to keep 31 souls above water, waiting for rescue that might come too late. The emergency blanket was thin, metallic, and designed for one person. Marcus draped it over Victoria's shoulders anyway, the crinkly material catching the wind like a broken sail. She was conscious, but barely, her body shaking with violent tremors. "That had nothing to do with the rolling deck. Hypothermia," muttered Dr. Patel, a passenger who'd identified himself as a cardiologist from Philadelphia. He was checking on the wounded with hands that shook nearly as badly as his patients. "We need to get her warm, get everyone warm." Easier said than done on an open fishing boat in a storm. Marcus had already distributed every tarp, blanket, and piece of spare clothing aboard the Mary Catherine. It wasn't nearly enough for 31 soaked survivors. There's a survival kit under the port bench, Marcus told a crew member who seemed steadier than most. Flares, first aid supplies, see what you can find. Victoria's eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with effort. The ship, she whispered. My ship, gone, Marcus said gently. But you're not. That's what matters. She tried to sit up straighter. Fighting through the fog of cold and shock. How many did we save? 30 besides yourself. Would have been more, but your boat would have sunk. Her voice was hoarse, but gaining strength. You already did the impossible. Around them, the other survivors were organizing themselves with the peculiar resilience of disaster. The crew members, trained for service if not emergency, began assessing injuries. Passengers shared what little dry clothing remained. A woman who'd been hysterical minutes before now cradled a child who'd been separated from parents, still unaccounted for. I need to check the radio again, Marcus said. But when he stood, Victoria caught his sleeve with fingers that barely worked. Wait, your name? I don't even know your name. Marcus Thompson. Victoria. She didn't offer a last name, and he didn't ask. In this moment, they were just Marcus and Victoria, two people trying to survive. The radio crackled with Coast Guard. Updates. The cutter Vigilant was 40 minutes out, fighting 8-foot seas. 2 helicopters were airborne, but battling winds that made rescue hoists dangerous. Other vessels were responding, but the Mary Catherine had drifted from the main debris field. Can you give them our position? Dr. Patel asked. Marcus checked his GPS unit, one of the few electronics still functioning. He read off coordinates that meant life or death, repeating them until the Coast Guard confirmed. Mary Catherine, this is Coast Guard. We have you on radar. Can you maintain position? Marcus looked at his dead engine, his empty fuel tank. Negative, Coast Guard, we're drifting. No power. Understood. We're coming to you. How many souls aboard? 31. Several injured, all cold. We need... The radio died, its battery finally exhausted. Marcus resisted the urge to throw the useless device overboard. Around him, 30 people looked to him for hope he wasn't sure he could provide. The Mary Catherine was riding lower with each wave, her bilge pumps overwhelmed. We need to lighten the load, said the man in the business suit who'd earlier protested taking on more survivors. Throw over anything unnecessary. Everything on this boat is necessary, Marcus replied curtly. We bail, we survive, we panic, we die. Victoria struggled to her feet, still wrapped in the emergency blanket. He's right. Everyone who can, grab something to bail with. Work in shifts, we're not giving up. Her words carried an authority that cut through fear. Even soaked and shivering, she had a presence that made people listen. The survivors formed. Bucket brigades, using anything that could hold water, coffee cups, a child's sand pail, even shoes. As they worked, stories emerged. The young crew member was James from Jamaica, sending money home to his mother. The woman with the child was Sarah, a teacher from Ohio on her first cruise. The businessman was Richard Blackwood, a name that made Victoria stiffen slightly, though Marcus didn't understand why. You knew the ship well, Marcus observed, watching Victoria direct the bailing efforts with surprising expertise. I've spent time on cruise ships, she said carefully, enough to know they're supposed to have better safety protocols than what we saw. Cost-cutting, James said bitterly. They kept reducing crew, cutting training. We all knew something would happen eventually. Victoria's face darkened, but she said nothing. Marcus filed the reaction away, focusing on more immediate concerns. The storm was worsening, and the Mary Catherine was fighting for every inch of freeboard. A rogue wave caught them broadside, sending everyone tumbling. Marcus grabbed Victoria instinctively, pinning them both against the wheelhouse as water cascaded. Over the rail, when it passed, 2 of their water bailers had gone overboard. This isn't working, Blackwood said, panic creeping into his voice. The boat's too small, too many people. Then swim, Marcus snapped, his patience finally fraying. Otherwise, shut up and bail. Victoria touched his arm lightly. He's scared. We all are. Marcus looked at her. really looked at her for the first time since the rescue. Beneath the smeared makeup and tangled hair, he saw strength that had nothing to do with social position. She was bailing with hands that had probably never done manual labor, working beside him without complaint. "Your daughter," Victoria said suddenly. "You mentioned a daughter earlier. Emma. She's 12. She must be terrified." Marcus's throat tightened. "She's strong, like her mother was." Was? Cancer. 5 years ago. Victoria's eyes softened. "I'm sorry. My father, also cancer. 2 years ago. It leaves such a hole, doesn't it?" They bailed in companionable silence after that. Two widowed souls finding unexpected connection in the midst of chaos. Around them, the survivors had settled into a rhythm. Bail, rest, bail again. The water level in the boat stabilized, though waves continued to add more. "There!" someone shouted. "A light!" Through the rain and spray, a searchlight swept across. The water. The Coast Guard cutter appeared like a steel angel, its powerful engines holding position against seas that tossed the Mary Catherine like driftwood. "Small vessel, this is Coast Guard cutter Vigilant. Prepare to receive lines." The rescue took 2 hours. In those seas, transferring 31 people from a sinking fishing boat to a Coast Guard cutter was delicate, dangerous work. They took the injured first, then children and women. Victoria tried to insist others go before her, but Marcus noticed. She was swaying on her feet, her brief burst of energy exhausted. "You're going," he told her firmly. "Together," she countered. "We go together or I stay." Marcus looked at his boat, his livelihood, taking on water faster now that the weight of people was reduced. Everything he owned was on this vessel. But Victoria's eyes held a determination that matched his own. Together, he agreed. They were among the last to transfer, helping everyone else before accepting rescue themselves. As the Coast Guard crew hauled them aboard, Marcus took one last look at the Mary Catherine. She was listing badly, mortally wounded by her heroic effort. "I'm sorry about your boat," Victoria said, following his gaze. Marcus thought about insurance he couldn't afford, about bills he couldn't pay, about starting over with nothing. Then he looked at the 30 people warming themselves with Coast Guard blankets, alive because an old fishing boat and her stubborn captain had been in the right place at the right time. "She did what she was meant to do," he said simply. "Can't ask for more than that." As the cutter turned toward port, its sick bay full of survivors, Marcus stood with Victoria at the rail. She'd kept the emergency blanket, now wrapped around both of them, against the wind. Neither spoke, but something had shifted between them. A recognition that they'd faced death together and chosen life, not just for themselves, but for others. In the distance, the Mary Catherine's lights finally went dark. The Coast Guard station at Rockport hummed with controlled chaos. Ambulances lined the dock, their lights painting red and blue patterns on the wet concrete. Media vans had already arrived, reporters shouting questions that nobody was ready to answer. The celestial dream disaster would lead every newscast, but for now, the survivors needed medical attention more than microphones. Marcus helped Victoria down the gangway, her legs unsteady after hours of cold and adrenaline. A paramedic immediately wrapped her in a proper thermal blanket and guided her toward a waiting ambulance. "Wait," she said, turning back to Marcus. "Your phone. Can I—" He pulled out his ancient flip phone, miraculously still functioning despite the salt water. They exchanged numbers quickly, her fingers trembling as she entered hers. "Victoria Smith," she said, giving the paramedic her name. Marcus noticed the slight hesitation before Smith, but exhaustion overwhelmed curiosity. "Get warm," he told her. "Get checked out, we can talk later." She nodded, then surprised him by squeezing his hand briefly. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." As her ambulance pulled away, another paramedic approached Marcus. "Sir, you need to be examined too." "I'm fine." That's what they all say before they collapse. The young woman was firm. "Hypothermia doesn't always show symptoms immediately." "Come on." The hospital emergency room was a maze of curtained areas and urgent voices. Marcus found himself on a gurney, warm blankets piled around him while a nurse checked his vitals. His body was finally admitting to the abuse it had taken. Muscles screaming, hands raw from rope burns, a deep exhaustion that seemed to reach his bones. "Dad!" Emma burst through the curtain, followed by Mrs. Chen from the fish market. His daughter threw herself into his arms, sobbing with relief. "I'm okay, kiddo, I'm okay." He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, grounding himself in this proof that he'd made it home. They said on the news, they said of fishing. Boat saved people, but they didn't know which one. And you weren't answering your phone, and shh, I'm here. I'm safe. Mrs. Chen patted his shoulder. She was so worried, we all were. You're a hero, Marcus. Hero. The word felt wrong. Heroes didn't lose their only means of supporting their children. Heroes didn't have to wonder how they'd pay for the bus ride home from the hospital. After the doctors cleared him and Emma's fears were soothed, they sat in the waiting room while discharge paperwork was processed. The news was playing on mounted televisions, and Marcus saw his first aerial footage of the disaster. The scale was staggering, debris scattered for miles, Coast Guard vessels everywhere, helicopters still searching for survivors. At least 30 people owe their lives to a local fisherman, the anchor was saying. His small boat, the Mary Catherine, was one of the only vessels close enough to respond immediately. "That's you," Emma whispered, awe in her voice. "Dad, that's you they're talking about." Before Marcus could respond, a familiar figure appeared on screen. Richard Blackwood, the businessman from the boat, was being interviewed. His suit was ruined, but his media training intact. "It was chaos," Blackwood was saying. "Complete breakdown of safety protocols. As a member of Sterling Cruise Line's board of directors, I can assure you we'll be conducting a thorough investigation." Board of directors. Marcus remembered Victoria's reaction to the man's name. Pieces of a puzzle he didn't fully understand, yet began forming in his mind. "Mr. Thompson." A hospital administrator appeared with a clipboard. "There's the matter of payment." Marcus's stomach sank. He had catastrophic insurance through the Fishermen's Association, but the deductible alone would wipe out his meager savings. "I'll need to set up a payment plan. Actually, it's been taken care of. Anonymous benefactor. They've covered all. Medical expenses for the Mary Catherine survivors." "What? Who?" "Anonymous means we don't know, sir, but you're free to go." 3 miles away, in a private room at the same hospital, Victoria Sterling was having a very different conversation. James, her assistant, who'd survived the sinking, sat beside her bed with a tablet, his usual efficiency dampened by the ordeal they'd shared. "The board is in emergency session," he reported. "Mr. Blackwood is already spinning the narrative. Technical failure, act of God, comprehensive insurance coverage. He's positioning himself as a hero for surviving and promising reform." Victoria's jaw clenched. "How many confirmed dead?" 312 so far, still counting. James's voice broke slightly. "Including Captain Morrison. He stayed at his post until the end." Victoria closed her eyes, adding each number to a weight she'd carry forever. Her father had built his company on the principle that every passenger was family. She'd let that. "Family down, I need you to do something quietly," she said. "Find out everything you can about Marcus Thompson, the fisherman who saved us, but James, discreetly. He doesn't need media attention. Of course, anything else? Set up an anonymous fund. Every survivor from the Mary Catherine gets their medical expenses covered, and find out what it costs. To replace a fishing boat." James made notes, then hesitated. "Victoria, the board is going to try to limit liability. They'll want you to distance yourself from the truth?" Victoria's eyes flashed. "From the fact that our cost-cutting killed 300 people? I've been distant enough, James. It's time to get very, very close to this problem." After James left, Victoria lay back against the hospital pillows. She could still feel the cold water, still see the terror in people's eyes as they jumped from her ship. But stronger than those memories was the image of Marcus Thompson, diving into freezing water without hesitation, risking everything for strangers. Her phone, waterlogged but miraculously functional after a nurse's hairdryer treatment, showed a text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus. Hope you're okay. Emma, my daughter, wants to know if you're all right. Kids worry." Victoria smiled despite everything. She typed back, "Tell Emma I'm fine thanks to her brave father. Warm and safe." A moment later, she says good. Also says you should come for dinner. "When you're better, I told her you probably have plans." What did she say to that? That everyone needs to eat. Kids got a point. Victoria found herself actually laughing, a sound that felt foreign after the day's horrors. "Smart girl. I'd like that. Fair warning, we're not fancy. Mac and cheese is a food group. Mac and cheese sounds perfect." She put the phone down, wondering at herself. When was the last time she'd had a meal that wasn't a business meeting? When had she last talked to someone who didn't want something from her beyond simple human connection? Through her window, she could see the harbour where the celestial dream had departed that morning. By now, salvage teams would be mobilizing, lawyers preparing, investigators descending. The sterling empire would survive. Companies like theirs always did. But Victoria wasn't sure she wanted to be the person who emerged from this tragedy, if it meant returning to the life that had enabled it. Her phone buzzed again. "Marcus, BTW. The news keeps calling me a hero. Feels weird. Just did what anyone would do." "No," she typed back. "Not anyone. Most people would have protected themselves first. You chose differently. Didn't feel like a choice." And that, Victoria realized, was the difference between people like Marcus and people like the board members who'd prioritize profits over lives. For him, saving others wasn't a choice. It was simply what you did. For them, letting people die wasn't a choice either. It was just business. She made a decision then, lying in that hospital bed. Whatever came next, whatever the board threatened or the lawyers advised, she wouldn't be the CEO who prioritized quarterly earnings over human lives. She'd be the woman Marcus Thompson had pulled from the water, someone who understood what really mattered, even if it cost her everything. The apartment above Chen's fish market had never felt smaller. Marcus stood in the doorway of what passed for their living room, surveying the reality of their situation. Without the Mary Catherine, he had no income. The anonymous benefactor had covered the hospital bills, but rent was due in 2 weeks. Emma needed school supplies, and the refrigerator was nearly empty. "I can work more hours at the market," Emma said from the kitchen table where she was doing homework. Mrs. Chen said, "No." Marcus's voice was firm. "School first, always." "But Dad, no buts. I'll figure something out." Emma bent back to her math problems, but Marcus caught her worried glances. At 12, she understood their precarious finances too well. He'd tried to shield her, but children of single parents learned to read the signs. The careful grocery shopping, the "we'll see" answers to any request that cost money, the way he nursed every cup of coffee to make the can last longer. His phone rang. Ted Michaels from the Fishermen's Association, probably calling about insurance. Marcus stepped onto their tiny balcony to take it. "Marcus, you sitting down?" Ted's voice was grim. "What now?" "Insurance companies claiming act of God. They're saying you took the boat into dangerous waters against weather advisories. They're denying the claim." The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus gripped the balcony rail, his knuckles white. "I saved 30 people, Ted. I know, everyone knows, but insurance companies don't care about heroics. They care about clauses and sub-clauses. I'm sorry, Marcus. We're fighting it, but fighting took time, and time was a luxury Marcus couldn't afford." After Ted hung up, Marcus stayed on the balcony, staring at the harbour. Other fishing boats bobbed at their moorings, heading out for evening runs. A week ago, that had been his life. Now he was just another unemployed man in a town full of them. His phone buzzed. "Victoria, how are you doing? Really not the brave face version. Despite everything, he almost smiled. In their few days of texting, she'd developed an uncanny ability to sense when he was struggling. Been better. Insurance company being difficult, but we'll manage. I'm sorry. That's not right. You saved lives. Apparently that's not covered in my policy. How about you? Back home? There was a pause before her response. In a hotel. Home doesn't feel quite right at the moment. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, Emma appeared on the balcony. Dad, there's a lady at the door. Marcus found Victoria standing in their narrow hallway, looking remarkably out of place in her designer jeans and silk blouse. She carried a grocery bag and wore an uncertain expression. I hope this isn't overstepping, she said quickly. Emma invited me for dinner, remember. I brought dessert. Emma beamed. I told you she'd come. Marcus felt he should protest. They barely had food for themselves, but the hope in Emma's eyes stopped him. His daughter had been through enough disappointment. Come in, he said. Fair warning, it really is just mac and cheese tonight. Victoria's smile was warm. My favorite. Their apartment was clean but shabby, everything second-hand and mismatched. Victoria didn't seem to notice or care, helping Emma set the table while Marcus cooked. She asked about Emma's school, listened with genuine interest to a long story about a science project, and praised the girl's insights. You're really smart, Victoria told her. What do you want to be when you grow up? A marine biologist, Emma said promptly. I want to study sustainable fishing practices so people like Dad can keep working without hurting the ocean. Victoria caught Marcus's eye over Emma's head. That's a wonderful goal. They ate mac and cheese from chipped plates, and Victoria declared it delicious with such sincerity that Emma glowed. The dessert she'd brought turned out to be a fancy chocolate tart from a bakery Marcus couldn't afford to walk past. This is amazing, Emma said, savoring each bite. Dad, can we get the recipe? I don't think they give those out, kiddo. Actually, Victoria said, I know the baker, I'll ask. After dinner, Emma excused herself to finish homework, leaving Marcus and Victoria on the tiny balcony with cups of instant coffee. Thank you, Marcus said, for coming, for dinner, for making Emma smile. She hasn't done much of that lately. She's wonderful. You've done an amazing job raising her alone. Don't feel like I'm doing such a great job at the moment. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Can't provide for her without a boat. Victoria was quiet for a moment. What will you do? Look for work. Maybe on one of the commercial vessels, though they're not hiring much. Construction, perhaps, whatever pays. And your boat? Can it be replaced? Marcus laughed bitterly. With what? I had basic insurance, and they're claiming I violated terms by going out in weather. Even if they paid, it wouldn't be enough for a decent vessel, and no bank's going to loan money to an unemployed fisherman. That's not right. Lot of things aren't right, but that's life. Victoria set down her coffee cup with sudden decision. I need to tell you something. Okay, my last name isn't Smith. Marcus turned to look at her. In the fading light, he could see tension in her shoulders, worry in her eyes. I figured as much. Smith's the name people give when they don't want to give their name. It's Sterling. Victoria Sterling. The name took a moment to register. Then the pieces clicked. Blackwood mentioning the board of directors, her knowledge of ships, the way she'd taken charge during the evacuation. You own the cruise line. My family does. Did. She stared at the harbor lights. I'm the CEO. Was the CEO. I don't know anymore. Marcus processed this, his mind recalibrating everything he knew about her. The woman who'd bailed water in his boat, who'd eaten mac and cheese with genuine pleasure, who'd made his daughter laugh. She was worth more than he'd make in 100 lifetimes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you looked at me like I was just Victoria. Not a Sterling, not a CEO, not the woman whose ship killed 300 people. Just me. The pain in her voice was real. Marcus had heard that tone before, in his own voice after Mary died. The guilt of surviving when others didn't. It wasn't your fault, he said. Wasn't it? She turned to face him. I let the board cut safety measures. I attended galas instead. Of inspections, I trusted people who saw human lives as acceptable losses. You were on that ship. You stayed to help others evacuate. That's not the action of someone who doesn't care. Caring too late doesn't bring people back. They stood in silence, the weight of truth between them. Inside, Marcus could hear Emma humming while she worked, oblivious to the conversation that was reshaping his understanding of everything. "I should go," Victoria said finally. "I've complicated your life enough." "Victoria, the medical bills, the anonymous fund, that was me. I wanted to help, but I understand if that feels like charity now." Marcus thought about pride, about accepting help from someone who could buy and sell his entire world without noticing. Then he thought about Emma, about bills, about the reality of their situation. "Thank you," he said simply, "for helping, for dinner, for being honest." She looked surprised. "You're not angry. You saved people in that water same as me. You just had a different view from the deck." He managed a small smile. "Though I have to say, you're definitely the first billionaire to eat mac and cheese at my table. The first to enjoy it that much, certainly." Her return smile was tentative, but real. Would it be all right if I came back?" Emma mentioned she needs help with a science project. Marcus knew he should say no. Their worlds were too different, the gap too wide. But Emma needed every advantage she could get, and Victoria's offer seemed genuine. She'd like that, just be yourself, not the CEO, not the sterling heiress, just Victoria. "I'm not sure I know who that is anymore. Maybe that's worth finding out." As she left, Victoria pressed something into his hand. "My real phone number. The other was my assistant's phone. If you need anything, and I mean anything, call me." Marcus looked at the business card. Elegant, embossed, nothing like his world. But the woman who'd given it to him had sat at his chipped table and made his daughter smile. Maybe that mattered more than the differences between them. Inside, Emma was waiting. "I like her," she announced. "She's sad, though, like you were after Mom." "Yeah, kiddo, she is. Maybe we can help her feel better, the way Mrs. Chen helped us." Marcus hugged his daughter, wondering at her intuition. Maybe we can. But as he looked at the bills piled on the kitchen counter, he wondered who was really helping whom, and whether accepting that help would cost more than just his pride. Dawn at the harbour came with a cruel reminder of Marcus's new reality. He stood at the docks, watching other boats head out for the morning catch. His usual slip sat empty, a gap-toothed smile in the marina's mouth. The Mary Catherine was gone, and with her, his identity as Captain Thompson. "You just gonna stand there feeling sorry for yourself, or you gonna do something about it?" Marcus turned to find Captain Roy Hendricks loading supplies onto his vessel. The older man's expression was gruff but not unkind. "Not much to do without a boat, Roy. Could use an extra hand today. Lost my deckhand to a construction job last week. Pays not much, but it's something." Pride warred with practicality. Marcus had been a captain for 15 years, owned his own vessel, made his own decisions. Now he was being offered work as a deckhand, the bottom rung of the maritime ladder. "Thanks, Roy, I appreciate it." "Don't thank me yet. We leave in 10 minutes, and I run a tight ship." Meanwhile, in the Sterling Towers of downtown, Victoria. Sterling faced her own battle. The emergency board meeting had been called for 8 a.m., and she arrived to find them already assembled, verdict predetermined. "Victoria, so good of you to join us," Richard Blackwood said from the head of the table. Her father's seat, she noted with cold anger. "I wasn't aware the meeting had been moved up. Given the circumstances, we felt it best to proceed quickly." Blackwood's smile was shark-like. "The media is demanding answers." Victoria took her seat, noting the stack of papers before each board member. "And what answers are we giving them?" The truth, of course, that this was an unprecedented technical failure despite our industry-leading safety protocols. Our insurance will cover the settlements, and we're already implementing additional measures. Industry-leading. Victoria's voice cut through his prepared speech. "Is that what we're calling deferred maintenance and skeleton crews?" Martin Chen shifted uncomfortably. "Victoria, We understand you're emotional given your personal involvement. 312 people are dead because of our cost-cutting measures. That's not emotion, Martin. That's fact. Alleged cost-cutting, the legal counsel interjected. We must be very careful about admitting liability. Victoria looked around the table at men and women she'd known for years, people who'd claimed to honor her father's legacy. When did we become this? When did protecting the stock price become more important than protecting lives? When we became a publicly traded company with fiduciary responsibilities, Blackwood responded coldly. Your father understood that. My father would be disgusted by what you've done in his name. The room erupted in heated crosstalk. Accusations flew. Voices raised, the veneer of corporate civility cracking. Through it all, Blackwood watched Victoria with calculating eyes. Finally, he called for order. Given the circumstances and the need for stable leadership during this crisis, I move that Victoria Sterling be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Seconded, Chen said quickly. Victoria watched the vote, unsurprised as hand after hand rose against her. Only 2 board members abstained, old friends of her father who lacked the courage to support her but couldn't bring themselves to complete the betrayal. The motion passes, Blackwood announced with satisfaction. Victoria, we'll need your company credentials and access cards. Security will escort you out. Back on Roy's boat, Marcus learned what it meant to work for someone else. After years of independence, Roy was a fair captain, but demanding, expecting Marcus to prove himself despite his experience. They worked familiar waters, hauling nets Marcus could have managed in his sleep, but as hired help rather than owner. You're doing good, Roy said during a break. Better than most would after losing everything. Don't have much choice. Emma. Needs me functional. How's she handling it? Like her mother, stronger than she should have to be. Roy spat over the side, crying shame about the insurance. We all signed that petition for what it's worth. Petition? Fishermen's Association started it, demanding the insurance company honor your claim. Got over 1,000 signatures already. Town knows what you did out there. Marcus felt a warm twist of gratitude. Didn't know about that. Well, you wouldn't, would you? Too proud to ask for help, just like your old man. They worked in companionable silence after that, hauling a decent catch. At the end of the day, Roy paid him in cash, less than Marcus would have made on his own, but enough to buy groceries and put gas in the truck. His phone had several messages, 3 from reporters wanting interviews, 1 from Emma checking, in and 1 from Victoria. Lost my job today. Turns out saving lives is bad for business. How was your day? Marcus called her instead of texting. You okay? I've been better. Her laugh was brittle. 20 years building the company, gone in a 20-minute vote. They're circling the wagons, protecting themselves. I'm sorry. Don't be. It clarifies things. I've been thinking about what? You said about finding out who Victoria is without the titles. Guess I'm about to find out. It's not easy, Marcus admitted. I've been working as a deckhand today. Swallowing pride tastes pretty bitter. But you did it. For Emma, we do. What we have to. Yes, Victoria said softly. We do. Marcus, can I ask you something? Sure. The investigation, they're going to try to blame everyone but themselves. The captain, the crew, even you. They'll say you shouldn't have been there, that you interfered with rescue operations. Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. Let them try. I want to help. I have documents, emails, proof of what they did. But I need someone who can't be bought or intimidated. You're talking about whistleblowing. I'm talking about justice. Those people deserve the truth. Marcus thought about the survivors he'd pulled from the water. About James, the young crew. Remember? About Captain Morrison, who'd gone down with his ship. Then he thought about Emma, about the precarious stability he was trying to rebuild. What do you need me to do? Meet with a journalist I trust. Tell your story, the real story. I'll provide the documentation to back it up. That'll make me a target. I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't ask. When and where? Victoria was quiet for a moment. You'd do that? even knowing the risk? 30 people are alive because we work together. 300 aren't because your board worked against safety. Yeah, I'll do it. They arranged to meet the next day. After hanging up, Marcus sat in his truck outside the apartment, engine off to save gas. Through the window, he could see Emma at the kitchen table, doing homework by the light of their one good lamp. His phone buzzed. A news alert. Sterling Cruise Line stock soars on news of CEO departure. The market had spoken. Removing the CEO, who tried to enforce safety standards, was good for business. It was the kind of math that made Marcus sick. Human lives reduced to percentage points and profit margins. Inside, Emma looked up as he entered. How was work? Different, but honest. She hugged him. I'm proud of you, Dad. I know it's hard working for someone else. How did you get so wise? Good genes, she grinned. Also, Victoria called earlier. She said she might have some books that would help with my science project. Is it okay if she brings them by? Yeah, kiddo. That's okay. As Emma returned to her homework, Marcus started dinner with their meager supplies. He thought about the strange turns life took. A week ago, he'd been a boat captain struggling to make ends meet. Now he was a deckhand, preparing to take on one of the most powerful corporations in America, aided by its former CEO, who'd become, what? A friend? Something more complicated. His phone showed another message from Victoria. Thank you for listening, for understanding, for being willing to help. I know it's a lot to ask. We do what's right, he typed back. That's what you taught me in the water that day. I think you already knew. You just reminded me. As Marcus cooked, he realized that despite everything, the loss, the fear, the uncertainty, he felt more purposeful than he had in years. Maybe that's what tragedy did, stripped away everything non-essential until only the truth remained. And the truth was simple. People had died because money mattered more than lives. If he could help change that, help prevent it from happening again, then losing the Mary Catherine meant something. It had to. The coffee shop Victoria had chosen sat tucked between a hardware store and a laundromat, the kind of place where locals nursed single cups for hours and tourists never ventured. Marcus arrived to find her already there, baseball cap pulled low, designer clothes replaced with jeans and a faded sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. You came, she said, relief evident in her voice. Said I would. Marcus slid into the booth across from her. Though I have to ask, why all the cloak and dagger? Because Sterling's lawyers are already building their defense and discrediting. Witnesses is part of their playbook. She pushed a folder across the table. I've seen them destroy people for less than what we're about to do. Before Marcus could open the folder, a woman approached their table. Mid-30s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of plainness that let her blend into crowds. She carried a reporter's notebook and a digital recorder. Marcus Thompson, she extended her hand. Diana Walsh, investigative journalist. Victoria's told me about you. All good, I hope. She said you're the only person in this mess who did the right thing without calculating the cost first. In my line of work, that makes you either a hero or a fool. Probably both, Marcus admitted. Diana sat beside Victoria, pulling out her tools of trade. Before we start, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. Sterling Cruise Lines has a legal team that could populate a small city. They'll dig into your past, your finances, your daughter's school records. Nothing will be private. Marcus thought of Emma. My daughter won't be targeted directly, Diana assured him. I've done this before, but they'll use her to pressure you. Suddenly, code violations might be found in your apartment. Your employer might receive complaints. Life will get complicated. It's already complicated. Victoria leaned forward. Marcus, if you want to walk away, I pulled 30 people out of the water. I couldn't pull out 300. He met Diana's gaze. What do you need to know? For the next 2 hours, Marcus told his story. Not the heroic version the media had crafted, but the truth, the fear, the calculations, the moment-by-moment decisions that had saved some and left others behind. Diana was a skilled interviewer, drawing out details he hadn't realized he'd noticed. The lifeboats, she pressed. Describe what you saw. Some wouldn't release. Others dropped too fast. It was like they'd been maintained just enough to pass inspection, but not enough to actually work when needed. The crew members you rescued, what did they say? Marcus closed his eyes, remembering. They were scared, undertrained. One kid, maybe 19, kept saying he'd only had one safety drill, and it was rushed because they needed him back at the bar. Victoria pulled documents from her bag. Here's the email chain where the board overruled my safety concerns. Here's the maintenance logs, the real ones, not the ones they'll submit to investigators. Here's the memo where they calculated that lawsuits would cost less than proper maintenance. Diana's expression darkened as she reviewed the papers. They actually put it in writing? Richard Blackwood believes in documentation. He never thought it would be used against him. This is... Diana looked up. This is enough to destroy them. Criminal negligence, at minimum. Why didn't you release this immediately? Because I wanted to do it right, Victoria said. With someone who couldn't be discredited as a disgruntled employee, someone whose heroism is already established. They talked until the coffee shop owner started giving them pointed looks. Diana had filled 3 notebooks and recorded 2 hours of conversation. As they prepared to leave, she stopped Marcus. One more question. Why did you dive in after Victoria specifically? There were others in the water. Marcus glanced at Victoria, then back at Diana. I don't know. Something about the way she'd been helping others first seemed wrong for someone like that to die. Someone like what? Someone who gave a damn. Outside, the 3 of them stood in the weak afternoon sun. Diana promised to start verifying the documents, building the story carefully. This will take time. Few weeks, maybe a month. Can you both handle the pressure that long? We'll manage, Victoria said. After Diana left, Marcus and Victoria walked slowly toward the harbor. Without discussing it, they ended up at the empty slip where the Mary Catherine used to dock. I'm sorry, Victoria said quietly, about your boat, about everything. Wasn't your fault. I was the CEO. Everything was my fault. She stared at the water. My father used to bring me here when I was little. Not to the yacht club. Here, to the working docks. He said this was where real sailing happened. Smart man. He was. He'd have liked you. She smiled sadly. He'd have been on that boat with you, pulling people out. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the harbor traffic. Finally, Victoria spoke again. I've been thinking about what to do next. After the story breaks, I mean. And I want to start something new. A shipping company that puts safety first, always. Small scale, nothing like Sterling. She hesitated. I was wondering if you'd consider being part of it. Marcus turned to look at her. I'm a fisherman, Victoria. I don't know anything about running a shipping company. You know what matters. You know what it means to be responsible for lives at sea. She met his gaze. I have money, connections, business experience, but I need someone who understands. The water, who can't be corrupted by spreadsheets and profit margins. You barely know me. I know you dove into a storm to save strangers. I know you're raising an incredible daughter alone. I know you're working as a deckhand without complaint. Because that's what needs doing. Her voice softened. I know you treat me like a person, not a walking bank account or a business opportunity. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced since Mary. Victoria, think about it. No pressure. Just think about it. His phone buzzed. Emma texting that she was home from school. I should go. Emma's waiting. The books I mentioned, for her project. They're in my car. They walked to her vehicle, a modest sedan that surprised him. What happened to the luxury cars? Sold them. Donated the money to the victims fund. She pulled a box of books from the trunk. Keeping them felt obscene. The books were college-level texts on marine biology and environmental science, but with handwritten notes in the margins, making complex concepts accessible to a 12-year-old mind. You did this? Marcus asked, seeing Victoria's handwriting. I have a lot of free time now. She seemed embarrassed. I hope they help. Victoria. He waited until she looked at him. Thank you. For the books, for trusting Diana, for the job offer, for all of it. Thank me when we survive what's coming. As Marcus drove home with the box of books, he thought about her offer, a new company built on principles instead of profits. It was a dream too large for a fisherman who'd just lost everything. But then again, a week ago, saving 30 lives had seemed impossible too. At home, Emma pounced on the books with delight. These are perfect. Look, she even marked the important parts. She did that for you. Emma looked up from the pages. Dad, are you and Victoria, we're friends. That's all. Mum would like her, Emma said matter-of-factly, returning to her reading. She would want you to be happy. Marcus started dinner, his daughter's words echoing. Mary would like Victoria, her intelligence, her growing courage, her kindness to Emma. But the gulf between their worlds seemed vast, and getting involved. With the former CEO of Sterling Cruise Lines, while preparing to testify against them, was complicated beyond measure. His phone showed a text from Victoria. Thank you for today, for trusting Diana, for being you. He started to type a simple response, then deleted it. Started again, deleted again. Finally, he wrote, partners look out for each other. That's what we are now, right? Partners. Her response came quickly. Yes, partners. I like that. Marcus smiled despite himself. Partners was safe, defined, limited. It was also, he suspected, not nearly enough to describe what was growing between them. But for now, with storms gathering on every horizon, partners would have to do. 2 weeks passed in a strange rhythm of ordinary life, shadowed by impending storm. Marcus worked Roy's boat each day, earning enough to keep them afloat while Diana Walsh built her story. Victoria came by most evenings, ostensibly to help Emma with her science project, but increasingly becoming part of their small family's routine. You're distracted today, Roy observed as Marcus untangled a net. Been that way all week. Just thinking. About that Sterling woman who's been visiting? Yeah, I heard. Roy's weathered face cracked a knowing smile. Small town, brother. Everyone knows everyone's business. We're just friends. Sure you are. That's why you shaved for the first time in months and finally fixed that broken step she tripped on. Marcus focused on the nets, but Roy wasn't done. Mary's been gone 5 years, Marcus. She wouldn't want you living like a monk. It's complicated. Love. Always is. That's how you know it's real. That evening, Marcus came home to find Victoria and Emma at the kitchen table, surrounded by poster boards and research materials. Emma was explaining her project with animated gestures, while Victoria listened intently, asking the kind of questions that made his daughter think deeper. Dad! Emma looked up with shining eyes. Victoria knows a marine biologist who wants to mentor me, Dr. Sarah Chen at the Oceanographic Institute. That's wonderful, kiddo. Marcus caught Victoria's eye over Emma's head, seeing the pleasure she took in his daughter's joy. I'm going to present on sustainable fishing practices and how traditional methods can actually help preserve fish populations, Emma continued. Victoria's been helping me with the economic modeling. Of course she has, Marcus said, noting how natural Victoria looked in their cramped kitchen, how right it felt to have her there. After Emma went to bed, Marcus and Victoria sat on the balcony with tea instead of coffee, Victoria's influence slowly civilizing their bachelor habits. Diana called, Victoria said quietly. The story's almost ready. She wants to run it Sunday. Maximum impact. 3 days. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. You ready for this? Are you? I keep thinking about what happens after. Win or lose. Sterling's lawyers will make our lives hell. Emma doesn't deserve that. Victoria set down her mug. I've been thinking about that too. I want to set up a trust for Emma's education. Whatever happens, no. The word came out harsher than intended. We're not taking your money. It's not charity. It's insurance. Making sure she's protected regardless of what Sterling does to us. Victoria, please. She turned to face him fully. I've spent my entire adult life making money for people who already had too much. Let me use it for something that matters, for someone who matters. The intensity in her voice, the way she looked at him, it shifted something between them. Marcus found himself leaning closer, drawn by more than gratitude or friendship. "We matter to you?" he asked softly. "More than I expected. More than I should probably admit." Her hand found his. "These past weeks, being here, being part of something real, I haven't felt this alive since my father died." Marcus turned his hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. "The other night, Emma asked if we were, what did you tell her? That we were friends. Is that what we are?" The question hung between them like morning mist. Marcus thought about all the reasons this was impossible. Their different worlds, the pending investigation, the fact that she could buy his entire life with pocket change. Then he thought about how she looked helping Emma, how her face lit up over mac and cheese, how she'd transformed from the polished CEO into someone warm and real and present. "I don't know what we are," he admitted. "I just know I look forward to seeing you every day, that Emma loves you, that you make our little apartment feel less empty." Victoria squeezed his hand. "I know you could never be with someone for their money. That's not something I've ever been sure of with anyone before. Your money is actually a problem, not an attraction." "No offense." She laughed, a genuine sound that transformed her face. "None taken. It's refreshing, actually." They sat holding hands as the harbour lights reflected on the water. Finally, Victoria spoke again. "After the story breaks, I'll be toxic to the business community. My money will be tied up in legal battles. I might lose everything. And I find I don't care. As long as," she trailed off, as long as I don't lose this. Whatever this is." Marcus lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You won't. Emma would never forgive me. Just Emma." "No," he said quietly. "Not just Emma." A door slammed somewhere in the building, breaking the moment. Victoria stood reluctantly. "I should go. Early meeting with Diana tomorrow." Marcus walked her to her car, their hands still linked. At the vehicle, she turned back to him. "Marcus, what if Diana's wrong? What if the story doesn't change anything? Then we'll have told the truth. Sometimes that has to be enough. Is it enough for you?" He thought about it. "The truth got you here, didn't it? Got you free from being who they wanted you to be. That seems like a pretty good start." Victoria smiled. The soft expression he'd learned was just for him and Emma. When did a fisherman get so wise? Probably around the time a CEO learned to appreciate mac and cheese. She stood on her toes, kissing his cheek. "Good night, Marcus." "Night, Victoria." He watched her drive away, touching the spot where her lips had brushed his skin. Back in the apartment, he found Emma reading in bed. "You're supposed to be asleep, kiddo." "I was thinking," she said, looking older than her 12 years. "When Victoria's around, you smile like you used to, before Mom got sick." I'm not saying you're replacing Mom. I know it doesn't work like that. But maybe you're adding to what we have instead of trying to fill what we lost. Does that make sense?" Marcus sat on her bed, smoothing her hair. "When did you get so smart?" "Victoria says I get it from you." Victoria's biased. "Yeah," Emma smiled. "She really is about you, anyway." After Emma finally slept, Marcus stood at his window looking out at the harbour. In 3 days, their carefully balanced world would explode. Diana's story would unleash forces beyond their control. But tonight, his daughter was happy. The woman he was falling for had held his hand, and truth was about to have its day. He'd captained boats through worse storms than what was coming. The difference was, this time he wouldn't be sailing alone. He had Emma steady as a compass, and he had Victoria, who'd chosen truth over comfort, them over fortune. Win or lose, that felt like everything. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made the harbour look like a postcard. Marcus was brewing coffee when his phone exploded with notifications. Diana's story had broken online at midnight, and by dawn it was everywhere. "Sterling Cruise Lines knowingly compromised safety for profit," screamed the headlines. The article was devastating in its thoroughness. Emails, memos, testimony from Marcus and other survivors, all painting a picture of corporate negligence that bordered on criminal. Emma appeared in her pajamas, tablet in hand. "Dad, you're famous. Like really famous." The article featured his photo prominently, a shot someone had taken of him helping survivors, water streaming from his clothes, face set with determination. The caption read, "Local fisherman Marcus Thompson saved 30 lives, while Sterling executives saved money." "This is good, right?" Emma asked. "Now everyone knows the truth." Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang. Roy's name on the screen, but the voice that answered was cold, formal. "Mr. Thompson, this is Harold Winters from Winters and Associates, representing Harbour Fishing Enterprises. I'm calling to inform you that your employment has been terminated. Effective immediately." "What? Roy hired me himself." "Mr. Hendricks no longer owns the vessel. It was purchased yesterday by a holding company. Your final check will be mailed. Do not return to the docks." The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, pieces clicking into place. A holding company buying Roy's boat overnight. There was only one explanation. "Dad?" Emma's voice was small. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, kiddo, just work stuff." But his mind was racing. If they'd bought Roy's boat to fire him, what else were they capable of? His phone rang again. The apartment manager voiced nervous. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry, but we've received a notice about code violations in your unit. You have 72 hours to vacate." "What violations? We've lived here 6 years." "I'm sorry, it's out of my hands. The new building owners were very specific." New owners? The pattern was clear. Sterling wasn't just fighting back, they were systematically destroying his life. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "They're moving against me too. Frozen my accounts. We need to meet." An hour later, Marcus found Victoria at the coffee shop, but she was transformed. Gone was the casual warmth of recent weeks, replaced by someone harder, more focused. The CEO armor was back on. "They're not just defending themselves," she said without preamble. "They're attacking. Your job, your home. That's just the beginning." "How bad?" She pulled out a folder. "This bad." Inside were photos, surveillance, shots of him and Emma, documentation of every place they'd been for weeks, credit reports, school records, even medical files that should have been private. His entire life laid bare and annotated. "This is illegal," Marcus said, fighting down rage. "They don't care. By the time any court addresses it, they'll have destroyed your credibility." Victoria's jaw tightened. "There's more. They have a witness who'll testify that you were drunk that day, that you endangered the survivors by overloading your boat." "What witness?" "Someone they're paying very well, I imagine." She met his eyes. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. I never thought they'd go this far. You tried to warn me." "Not enough, not about this." She reached for his hand, then pulled back. "There's something else. Something I didn't tell you because I thought it would complicate things." Marcus waited, seeing her struggle with words. "My ex-husband is on Sterling's board, has been since our divorce. He's the one coordinating this. He knows exactly how to hurt me, and he's figured out that hurting you is the most effective way." The revelation reframed everything. This wasn't just corporate warfare, it was personal. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was falling for you. And I didn't want you to think—" She stopped, started again. "I didn't want you to doubt what was real between us." "Victoria, they're going to release photos of us together, spin it that I'm buying your testimony with sexual favors. They'll make it sound like Emma's been exposed to inappropriate behavior. Child services will get involved." The threat to Emma changed everything. Marcus felt something cold and dangerous rise in his chest. "They threaten my daughter? That's their leverage. They want you to recant, say Diana misquoted you, that you were traumatized and confused." Victoria's voice broke slightly. "They want me to publicly support the company line, admit I was emotionally unstable after the accident. And if we don't, then they destroy us both. Completely." Marcus stood abruptly, pacing the small space. Through the window, he could see normal people living normal lives, unaware that corporate titans were playing chess with human pieces. "There has to be another way," he said. "I have money hidden they can't touch. Not much, but enough. We could leave, start over somewhere." "Run?" Marcus turned to face her. "That's your solution? What else can we do? They own judges, politicians, media outlets. The story's out there, but they're already spinning it. By tomorrow, we'll be the villains." Marcus thought of Emma, of the life they'd built, of the truth they'd tried to tell. Then he thought of the 30 people who were alive because he'd acted, and the 300 who weren't because Sterling hadn't. "No," he said quietly, "we don't run. Marcus, my daughter's mother died fighting, fought the cancer until her last breath. I won't teach Emma that running is an option when things get hard. This isn't about pride. No, it's about right and wrong. They think they can buy and threaten their way out of consequences. Maybe they can, but not without a fight." Victoria studied his face. "You're sure? Even knowing what they'll do?" "I pulled 30 people out of the water. Each one of them has a family who'd want the truth told, no matter the cost." He sat back down, taking her hands. "But you don't have to stay for this fight. You've done enough." "Stop." Her grip tightened. "If you're staying, I'm staying. Partners, remember? This is going to get uglier." "I know." She managed a small smile. "But I've got a good lawyer, and more importantly, I've got you." Marcus brought her hands to his lips. "We'll need to be smart, play their game better than they do." "I've been thinking about that." The CEO gleam returned to her eye. "What if we flip the narrative? Instead of letting them paint us as villain and accomplice, we become something else." "What?" "America's unlikely love story. The billionaire who gave up everything for truth, and the fisherman who saved lives." She leaned forward. "They want to use our relationship against us. Let's use it against them. People love an underdog romance. You want to weaponize us? I want to protect us. And Emma. And the truth." Victoria's voice hardened. "They declared war. I'm just suggesting we choose the battlefield." Marcus considered. It using their growing relationship as a shield felt wrong, but not as wrong as letting Sterling destroy them unopposed. "All right," he said finally. "How do we do this? First, we get ahead of their narrative. Diana has media contacts. We go public with our story, all of it. The rescue, the investigation, falling in love against impossible odds." Victoria smiled grimly. "Then we let America decide who the real villains are." As they planned, Marcus's phone buzzed with another notification. Someone had leaked his financial records online, showing his debts, his struggles, painting him as desperate enough to lie for money. The war had begun. But looking at Victoria, brilliant, fierce, and absolutely committed to standing with him, Marcus thought they might just have a chance. "One condition," he said. "Whatever we tell the media, whatever we have to play up for the cameras, what's real between us stays real. Private. Ours. Deal," Victoria said softly. "What's real is the only thing keeping me sane right now." They were about to leave when Victoria's phone rang. Her face went pale as she listened. "What?" Marcus asked. When she hung up, "That was my lawyer. Richard Blackwood just announced he's taking over as CEO. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook. "And his first act was to countersue me for corporate espionage and defamation. They're seeking damages of $50 million. The plot had twisted all right. The hunters had become the hunted, and the real fight was just beginning." The motel room was a far cry from their apartment, but it was all Marcus could afford after the eviction notice. Emma sat on one of the 2 beds, doing homework, while pretending not to notice the water stain on the ceiling or the way the air conditioner rattled. She'd taken the upheaval with a grace that broke Marcus's heart. "It's like camping," she'd said when they'd moved in that morning, "just with walls and a TV." Now, as evening fell, Marcus watched the news coverage of their story. The narrative was already shifting, just as Victoria had predicted. Financial experts questioned the timing of Diana's article. Legal analysts suggested Marcus might have coached witnesses. Victoria's photo, the one from her CEO days, all sharp edges and cold beauty, dominated the screen beside his weather-beaten fisherman's portrait. Unlikely allies or calculated conspiracy? The anchor asked. More after these messages. His phone buzzed. Victoria texting, "Don't watch the news, it'll just make you angry." Too late. "You? In my lawyer's office. 5th hour. He's trying to find assets they haven't frozen. Not having much luck." A knock at the door made Marcus tense. Through the peephole, he saw Diana Walsh, looking harried. "They killed the follow-up story," she said without preamble, pushing past him into the room. "My editor got a call from corporate. Suddenly, we need more verification before running." "Anything else?" "They got to your paper. They got to everyone. 3 other journalists who were working angles on this have been reassigned or fired." Diana slumped in the room's only chair. "I've never seen anything like this. It's like they own the entire media landscape." Emma looked up from her homework. "But the truth is already out there, right? People know what happened." Diana's expression softened. "You're right, sweetie. The truth is out there. But sometimes powerful people can make enough noise that the truth gets hard to hear. Then we make our own noise," Marcus said. Victoria had an idea. "The romance angle?" Diana nodded. "It could work. Human interest plays better than corporate. Malfeasance anyway, but you'll need to sell it completely. Every moment will be scrutinized." "It's not an angle," Emma said quietly. "Dad and Victoria really do care about each other." Diana studied Marcus's face. "Is that true? Because if you're playing her or she's playing you, it's real." The admission came easier than expected. "Complicated and probably impossible, but real." "Then we can work with that." Diana pulled out her phone. "I have a contact at 60 Minutes. They're interested, but they'll want everything. The rescue, the relationship, the corporate retaliation. Full transparency." "When?" "Tomorrow. They'll send a crew here." She looked around the shabby motel room. "Maybe somewhere else would be better." "No," Marcus said firmly. "Let them see what Sterling's doing to us. The truth, remember?" After Diana left, Marcus sat beside Emma. "You okay with this? It's going to mean cameras, questions, people talking about us. Will it help stop the bad guys?" "Maybe. Then I'm okay with it." Emma leaned against him. "Dad, is Victoria going to be my stepmom?" The question hit like a rogue wave. It's not that simple. I know she's rich and we're not. I know her world is different, but she looks at you the way Mom used to." Emma's 12-year-old wisdom struck again. "And you look happy when she's around." "It's complicated, kiddo. Love is supposed to be complicated. That's what makes it interesting." Later, after Emma was asleep, Marcus stood outside the motel room, breathing night air that smelled of exhaust and distant ocean. His phone rang. "Victoria, how bad is it?" he asked. "I'm officially homeless." She laughed, but it was brittle. "My accounts are frozen, credit cards cancelled. My ex even had my country club membership revoked, which feels petty even for him." "Where are you staying?" "My lawyer's guest room. He's one of the few people not terrified of Sterling's legal team." A pause. "How's Emma?" "Treating poverty like an adventure. Kids tougher than both of us. Must get it from her father." "Victoria." Marcus struggled with words. "This morning, when they came with the eviction notice, I thought about taking their deal. Just for a second, let them win, protect Emma from this." "What stopped you?" "You. The thought of you facing them alone. The thought of teaching Emma that money always wins." He gripped the phone tighter. "But I need to know something. Is this real? Us? Or is it just crisis bringing us together?" The silence stretched long enough that Marcus wondered if the connection had dropped. Then Victoria spoke, her voice soft but certain. 3 weeks ago, I had everything the world says matters. Money, power, respect. And I was empty, Marcus. So empty I didn't even realize it until—" She took a breath. "Until I watched you dive into that water. You knew your boat was all you had, knew saving strangers might cost everything, and you dove anyway. That's when I knew." "Knew what?" That you were the kind of man I'd been looking for my whole life without knowing it. Someone who measures worth in actions, not accounts. Someone who'd choose right over rich every time. Victoria, I know it's crazy. I know we're from different worlds. I know this is the worst possible time. But Marcus, I've lived my whole life at the right time with the right people, and it nearly killed me inside. Her voice grew stronger. So yes, this is real. Real enough that I'd rather be homeless with you than comfortable with anyone else. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling something loosen in his chest. The interview tomorrow. They'll want to hear this, our story. Then we'll tell them. All of it. The rescue, the investigation, falling for each other when we shouldn't have. She paused. And Marcus, when this is over, when we've won or lost or whatever happens, I want to talk about that future I mentioned. The shipping company, building something good from all this wreckage. Let's survive tomorrow first. Fair enough. But Marcus, we will survive this. Together. After they hung up, Marcus looked up at the stars, barely visible through the light. And pollution. Somewhere out there, the ocean rolled on, indifferent to human schemes and corporate warfare. He'd lost his boat to those waters, but he'd gained something else. A partner, a purpose, a possibility he hadn't dared imagine. Tomorrow, they'd tell their story to millions. They'd stand against one of the most powerful corporations in America, with nothing but truth and each other. It was David versus Goliath if David was a broke fisherman and Goliath owned judges and journalists. But sometimes, Marcus reflected, David won, and sometimes love stories that began in disaster ended in triumph. His phone buzzed one more time. A photo from Victoria, her and her lawyer going over documents, but she was smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Homeless, but hopeful. See you tomorrow, partner." Marcus smiled despite everything. Tomorrow would bring what it brought, but tonight he had a daughter who trusted him, a woman who'd chosen him over empire, and the knowledge that some things mattered more than money. Sterling. Cruise lines had taken his boat, his job, his home, but they'd also given him something priceless, the chance to stand for something, with someone, against odds that made the storm that sank the celestial dream look like a gentle breeze. He went back inside, checking on Emma one more time. In sleep, she looked younger, more vulnerable. He'd protect her through this, whatever it took, and maybe, just maybe, they'd come out the other side with a new kind of family. The plot had twisted again, but this time, Marcus thought they might. Be ready for whatever came next. The 60 Minutes crew transformed the shabby motel room into a makeshift studio. Lights softened the water stains, cameras' angles avoided the worst of the decay, but Marcus had insisted they show enough truth. This was what standing up to power looked like. Victoria arrived with her lawyer, Thomas Chen, a silver-haired man who'd been her father's friend. She wore simple clothes, her designer wardrobe locked away with her frozen assets, but she carried herself with a dignity that transcended. "Fabric, you ready for this?" she asked Marcus quietly while the crew adjusted equipment. "Are you? I've done 100 interviews as CEO, but never one where I had to be myself." She took his hand. "Stay close?" Always. The interviewer, veteran journalist Robert Keane, had a reputation for cutting through spin. He seated them together in the motel's worn couch, Emma visible in the background doing homework, a touch of normalcy that humanized the scene. "Let's start at the beginning," Keane said once the cameras rolled. "Marcus, what made you sail toward a sinking cruise ship when everyone else was sailing away?" Marcus had rehearsed nothing. He simply spoke the truth. People needed help. I had a boat. Wasn't really a decision. Even knowing you could lose everything. What's everything compared to someone's life? Keane turned to Victoria. "And you were on that ship, in charge of it really. What was going through your mind as it sank?" Victoria's composure cracked slightly. "Failure? I'd failed every person on that ship by letting safety become secondary to profit. I stayed to help evacuate because it was the least I could do. Then Marcus saved you. He saved 30 people. I just happened to be one of them, but you became more than that." Victoria glanced at Marcus. Yes, we became more. The interview deepened, covering the investigation, the whistleblowing, Sterling's retaliation. Keane was skilled, drawing out details that painted a picture of corporate malfeasance and personal courage. "Sterling Cruise Lines says you're lying for money," Keane said to Marcus. "That Ms. Sterling here is essentially buying your testimony. Look, around," Marcus gestured at the motel room. "Does this look like I'm getting rich? I lost my boat, my job, my home. If I wanted money, I'd have taken Sterling's offer to stay quiet. They made an offer? Through intermediaries. Recant my story. Get a new boat, no questions asked." "Why didn't you take it?" Emma looked up from her homework. "Because my dad doesn't lie, not for money, not for anybody." The camera caught the moment, a child's simple faith that cut through adult complexity. Keane, veteran that he was, let the silence hold. "Your relationship," he continued eventually. "The timing is convenient for this narrative." "Falling in love is never convenient," Victoria said. "Trust me, I've tried to schedule it before, but watching Marcus during and after the rescue, seeing his integrity, his devotion to his daughter, how could I not fall for him? And you?" Keane asked Marcus. "Falling for a billionaire? I fell for a woman who helped bail water from my boat with her bare hands, who worked beside me to save strangers. The money was actually a mark against her, not for her." "How so?" "Because it meant people would always question my motives, like you are now." Marcus met Keane's eyes steadily. "I was happier when I thought she was just Victoria Smith's survivor. But you love who you love." The interview continued for 2 hours. They covered everything. The evidence against Sterling, the personal attacks, the financial devastation. Through it all, Marcus and Victoria presented a united front, their hands occasionally touching, their support for each other evident. "One last question," Keane said. "If you could do it all over, knowing what would happen, would you change anything?" "Yes," Victoria said immediately. "I'd have fought harder against the safety cuts. I'd have resigned rather than let them proceed. Maybe those 300 people would still be alive." "Marcus?" "No. Every choice I made led to saving those 30 people and meeting Victoria and Emma, becoming who she is through adversity. I'd lose the boat again. I'd lose everything again." After the crew left, the three of them sat in exhausted silence. Emma had moved to sit between them, creating a makeshift family unit on the uncomfortable couch. "Did we do okay?" Victoria asked. "You were perfect," Emma said. "Both of you, real and honest and good." Thomas Chen, who'd observed quietly, finally spoke. "It airs tomorrow night. Sterling will respond immediately. Are you prepared for that?" "What else can they take?" Marcus asked. "More than you might imagine. But," Thomas smiled grimly, "I've been busy too." "That countersuit for 50 million? I found some interesting irregularities in how it was filed. And Victoria, remember those board meetings you recorded for your personal notes?" Victoria straightened. "The ones where they discussed the safety cuts?" "The very same. Turns out, in this state, you were within your rights to record them. And they're admissible. Why didn't we use them before? Because I was saving them for the countersuit, which we file Monday morning." Thomas's smile turned predatory. "Wrongful termination, defamation, conspiracy to commit fraud, and a few other charges that should keep Sterling's lawyers busy." "We can't afford," Marcus began. "I'm working pro bono," Thomas interrupted. "William Sterling gave me my first job out of law school. I owe his daughter better than what she's received." Hope flickered for the first time in days. They had ammunition. They had allies. They had each other. Victoria's phone rang. She looked at the screen and paled. "It's my daughter, Sophia. She's been at university in Italy." She answered, and they could all hear the sobbing on the other end. Marcus caught enough words to understand. Sterling had contacted Sophia's school, threatened to expose some manufactured scandal about her mother unless Victoria backed down. "They're using my daughter," Victoria whispered, after calming Sophia, "and promising to fix everything. God, Marcus, they're going after our children." The hope of moments before curdled into rage. Marcus stood, pacing the small room like a caged animal. Using Emma was one thing. She was here, he could protect her. But Sophia was thousands of miles away, vulnerable. "We end this," he said quietly. "No more defense. We go after them." "How?" Victoria asked. "You said you had money hidden they couldn't touch. How much?" "Maybe 2 million. Why?" "Because Thomas is going to need resources for what comes next." Marcus turned to the lawyer. "Can you file criminal charges?" "Not civil, criminal." Thomas considered. "With the recorded meetings and the evidence from the investigation?" "Possibly, but the district attorney would have to agree to prosecute. Then we make it impossible for him not to. Diana publishes everything, not just articles, the actual documents. We do more interviews. We make so much noise that ignoring us becomes political suicide." "That's war," Thomas warned. "Total war. They'll destroy you both." "They're already trying," Victoria said, standing to join Marcus. "But they made a mistake going after our daughters. Emma, Sophia, they're innocents in this. So were the 300 people who died," Marcus added. "Time Sterling learned what it costs to treat lives as acceptable losses." Emma had been quiet through all this, but now she spoke. "In my science project, I learned that sometimes you have to break things down completely before you can build them better. Maybe that's what this is. Breaking down the bad so something good can grow." Marcus hugged his daughter, drawing strength from her faith. Victoria joined them, and for a moment they stood together. Not billionaire and fisherman, not David and Goliath, just 3 people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided to build something new. "All right," Thomas said, gathering his papers. "War it is. But first, you all need rest. Tomorrow's going to be intense." As he left, Victoria looked at Marcus. "I should go too. Let you and Emma stay," Emma said. "Please. We have 2 beds and you shouldn't be alone. None of us should." Victoria looked to Marcus, who nodded. "Emma's right. We're family now, whatever that means. Family sticks together." That night, as Emma slept in one bed and Marcus and Victoria sat vigil in chairs, planning and worrying, something fundamental shifted. They were no longer victims of Sterling's attacks. They were no longer just telling their story. They were writing a new ending. The 60 Minutes interview aired Sunday night to an audience of 12 million. By Monday morning, the video clips had been shared 50 million times online. Justice for the Celestial Dream began trending alongside Marcus and Victoria, which had taken on a life of its own. Marcus woke to find Victoria already on the phone, pacing the narrow space between the motel beds. Emma was at the small table, monitoring social media on her tablet with the intensity of a war room strategist. "Dad, look at this," Emma said, showing him her screen. "People are boycotting Sterling Cruises. Their stock is down 8% in pre-market trading." "Language, Em," Marcus said automatically, though his heart wasn't in the scolding. Victoria ended her call. "That was Thomas. The district attorney wants to meet today. He's feeling the pressure. Good or bad? Depends on whether he's more afraid of Sterling's lawyers or voters." She sat on the bed, exhaustion showing. Sophia called. "The university backed down after seeing the interview. Apparently, threatening students based on their parents' actions doesn't play well internationally." "One victory," Marcus said. "How are you holding up?" "Running on adrenaline and rage." She managed a tired smile. "You?" "Same. But we need to be smart. They'll counterpunch hard." As if on cue, Marcus's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Warily, "Mr. Thompson, this is Richard Blackwood. I think it's time we talked man to man." Marcus put the phone on speaker, motioning for Victoria to stay quiet. "I'm listening. You've made your point. The interview was effective. But let's be practical. You're living in a motel with your daughter. No job, no prospects. How long can you keep this up? As long as it takes. Your daughter deserves better. I'm prepared to make a very generous offer. $5 million. Cash. All you have to do is clarify that you may have misremembered some details. Trauma does that, you know. Not interested. 10 million. And a house. And a trust fund for Emma's education." Marcus felt Victoria tense beside him. It was more money than he could imagine, enough to secure Emma's future forever. No, you're a fool, Thompson. We'll bury you in legal fees. Your daughter will grow up watching her father destroyed by his own stubbornness. Better that than watching him sell his soul. Marcus kept his voice steady. That all? One more thing. Tell Victoria her mother's nursing home has been having some financial difficulties. Would be a shame if they had to close. The line went dead. Victoria's face had gone white. My mother has dementia. She doesn't even know who I am anymore, but she's safe there, cared for. They're desperate, Marcus said, threatening sick old women. That's not strength, it's weakness. Thomas arrived an hour later with Diana and a team of volunteers who'd reached out after the interview. The motel room became a makeshift headquarters, laptops and phones covering every surface. The DA is willing to present to a grand jury, Thomas announced. But he wants more evidence. Something ironclad. I might have something, a young woman said. Marcus recognized her. James, Victoria's former assistant. I've been copying files for months. Everything's in cloud storage they don't know about. James, Victoria hugged him. I thought you were in the hospital still. I was. But seeing that interview, I couldn't stay silent. He pulled out a drive. Maintenance reports, both versions. Email chains about calculating acceptable casualty rates, and something else. Recordings of Blackwood discussing bribing safety inspectors. The room erupted in activity. Diana began reviewing files, already composing her next story. Thomas called the DA with the new information. Volunteers started organizing the evidence for maximum impact. We need to control the narrative. One volunteer, a public relations specialist who'd lost her sister on the Celestial Dream, suggested. Sterling will try to make this about money. We make it about justice. They worked through the day, ordering pizza that tasted like cardboard, but fuel nonetheless. Emma helped organize documents, her quick mind catching connections adults missed. Victoria worked the phones, calling in favors from business contacts who'd been afraid to help before, but were emboldened by public support. As evening approached, Marcus stepped outside for air. The motel parking lot wasn't much to look at, but it had become their battlefield. He was surprised to find Captain Roy waiting by a rusty pickup truck. Roy, thought you couldn't come around. New boat owners and all. Roy spat tobacco juice. Screw 'em. Boat might be theirs, but my conscience is mine. He handed Marcus an envelope. Fishermen's Association took up a collection. It's not much, but it'll keep you fed while you fight these bastards. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Roy, don't get sentimental on me. We look after our own. Besides, Roy grinned, my nephew's a maritime lawyer. Says what Sterling did with the safety. Violations could make them liable for wrongful death. A lot of families might be interested in a class action suit. That could be billions in damages. Yep, might just sink them worse than they sank that ship. Roy clapped Marcus's shoulder. You started something, boy. Now finish it. Back inside, the war room was buzzing. Thomas was off the phone with the DA, looking satisfied. Grand jury convenes Wednesday. If they indict, arrests could happen by Friday. Arrests? Emma asked. Like jail. If we prove criminal negligence, yes, Thomas explained gently. People who make decisions that kill others sometimes go to jail. Good, Emma said firmly. Mum went to the hospital and didn't come back. Those people went on a cruise and didn't come back. Someone should pay for that. Victoria pulled Marcus aside. There's something else. A contact at the SEC says they're opening an investigation into Sterling's financials. Apparently, lying about safety, measures to inflate stock prices is fraud. How long have you known? 10 minutes. I wanted to be sure before... She took his hand. Marcus, we might actually win this. Maybe, but they're not going down easy. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, just a photo. It showed Emma's school, taken from across the street. The implied threat was clear. Marcus showed it to Thomas, who immediately called his contacts at the FBI. Threatening a witness's child, they just added federal charges to their problems. But Marcus felt cold despite the legal optimism. Sterling was wounded, cornered, dangerous. The climax was coming, and cornered animals fought hardest. "Whatever happens next," he told Victoria quietly, "we protect Emma. Everything else is secondary." "Agreed. Sophia's flying in from Italy tomorrow. I want both girls where we can see them." They worked late into the night, building their case, preparing for the grand jury, marshalling forces for the final battle. The motel room had become their fortress, humble but holding. As Emma finally fell asleep and the volunteers headed home, Marcus and Victoria stood on the walkway outside, looking at stars dimmed by city lights. "My father would have liked this," Victoria said. "Not the tragedy, but the fight. He always said the measure of a company was how it treated its weakest stakeholder." "We're going to win," Marcus said, surprising himself with his certainty. "How? Do you know? Because we have to. Because 300 ghosts deserve justice. Because our daughters deserve a world where money doesn't excuse murder." He turned to her. "Because I found you in the worst possible way, and I'm not letting Sterling take that too." Victoria kissed him then, soft and sure, and tasting of hope despite everything. When they parted, she whispered, "Whatever happens Wednesday, we've already won something. We found each other. We told the truth. We stood up. But we're going to win the rest too," Marcus said. "For them, for us, for everyone who's ever been told their life was worth less than a profit margin." They went back inside, to Emma and duty and the dawn that would bring the final battle. The climax was coming, but they would meet it together, armed with truth and love and the kind of courage that had once driven a fisherman to dive into freezing water to save strangers. Sterling Cruise Lines had awakened something they couldn't buy or threaten into silence. They'd created their own perfect storm, and it was about to make landfall. Wednesday arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that made everything seem sharper, more real. The courthouse steps were crowded with media, protesters holding pictures of celestial dream victims, and Sterling's legal army in their $1,000 suits. Marcus helped Emma from Thomas Chen's car, her hand small but steady in his. She wore her best dress, the one they'd bought for her school concert last year. Victoria emerged from the other side, transformed back into her CEO armor, a borrowed suit that somehow looked like it cost millions. "Ready?" Thomas asked them. "No," Marcus said honestly. "But we're here." They climbed the courthouse steps through a gauntlet of shouted questions and flashing cameras. Marcus kept Emma close, Victoria flanking her other side, creating a protective triangle. At the top, Richard Blackwood waited with Sterling's lead counsel. "Last chance, Thompson," Blackwood said quietly as they passed. "Think of your daughter." "I am," Marcus replied, not breaking stride. Inside they were separated. Marcus would testify to the grand jury alone. No lawyers, no support. Just him and 23 citizens deciding whether crimes had been committed. "Tell the truth," Thomas advised. "All of it. Let them see who you are." The grand jury room was smaller than Marcus expected, more intimate. 23 faces looked back at him. Teachers, shop owners, retirees, people like him who'd been called to judge whether the powerful should face consequences. The prosecutor, Assistant DA Sarah Martinez, was young but sharp. She walked Marcus through that day with surgical precision, the weather warnings ignored out of desperation. The first sight of the sinking ship, the decision to help. "Why?" she asked. "Why risk everything for strangers?" Marcus thought of all the complicated ways he could answer. Instead, he said simply, "Because my daughter would have been ashamed of me if I hadn't." A juror, a woman about Mary's age would have been, wiped her eyes. Martinez led him through the rescue, Victoria's near drowning, the hours of saving whoever they could. Then came the harder questions about Sterling's retaliation, the threats, the systematic destruction of his life. "They took everything," Marcus said. "My boat, my job, my home. They threatened my daughter's school, all because I told the truth about what I saw." "What did you see, Mr. Thompson?" "I saw lifeboats that wouldn't launch, crew members who didn't know emergency procedures. I saw 300 people die because someone decided their lives were worth less than maintenance." "Costs! Objection!" Blackwood's voice rang out from the gallery where he'd been observing. "This witness is speculating. Mr. Blackwood," the jury foreman said coldly, "this is a grand jury, not a trial. You have no standing to object. Security, please escort him out." As Blackwood was removed, still protesting, Marcus felt a shift in the room's energy. The jurors were angry now, seeing the arrogance they were being asked to judge. Meanwhile, in another part of the courthouse, Victoria faced her own grand jury. Her testimony was more technical. Board meetings, safety reports, the systematic prioritization of profit over lives. But when asked why she'd risked everything to expose it, her answer echoed Marcus's simplicity. "Because I couldn't look at myself in the mirror knowing I'd stayed silent. Because Marcus Thompson showed me what courage looked like, and I couldn't do less." She produced the recordings Thomas had mentioned. Board meetings where Blackwood and others had explicitly discussed acceptable casualty rates, where they'd calculated that lawsuits would cost less than safety compliance. "Play it," the foreman said. Blackwood's voice filled the room, cold and calculating. "The insurance will cover deaths. It won't cover the profit loss from cancelled cruises. The math is simple." "Simple," Victoria repeated. 300 lives reduced to math. Back in Marcus's jury room, James testified via video link, still recovering but determined. He'd brought receipts, literally, falsified maintenance logs, bribed inspectors, a paper trail of malfeasance that led straight to the C-suite. Diana. Walsh testified about the intimidation, the threats to her sources, the attempt to kill the story. Other witnesses followed, survivors who'd seen the chaos, crew members who'd been ordered to lie about safety drills, families who'd lost everything. By noon, both grand juries had heard enough. They retired to deliberate while Marcus, Victoria, Emma and their allies waited in a conference room Thomas had secured. "How long will it take?" Emma asked. "Could be hours," Thomas said. "Could be days." It was 90 minutes. "The grand jury has returned true bills," the clerk announced. "Indictments for criminal negligence, manslaughter, conspiracy to defraud, witness intimidation and racketeering." The list of those indicted was a who's who of Sterling's leadership. Richard Blackwood, Martin Chen, 5 other board members. Even Victoria's ex-husband, whose role in the intimidation campaign had been exposed. "Arrest warrants will be issued immediately," Martinez told them. "Mr. Thompson, Ms. Sterling, you should know that your testimony was crucial. The jury, specifically, cited your courage in their statement." Outside, the courthouse steps had become a celebration. Families of victims hugged each other. The media, for once, seemed united in their coverage. This was justice delayed, but not denied. But Sterling wasn't done. As they tried to leave, a process server pushed through the crowd. "Victoria Sterling, you're being sued for defamation, breach of fiduciary duty, and corporate espionage. Damages sought, $200 million. They're trying to bankrupt me completely," Victoria said, reading the papers. "Let them try," Thomas said, grinning. "Discovery works both ways. They just gave us access to every document in the company." That night they watched from the motel as the arrests played out on live television. Blackwood in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence. Martin Chen trying to cover his face as he was led to a police car. Victoria's ex-husband caught at the airport, attempting to flee. "Is it over?" Emma asked. "The criminal part's just beginning," Marcus said. "Trials, appeals, all of that. But yeah, kiddo, the worst is over." Victoria's phone rang. She listened, her face cycling through emotions. When she hung up, she was crying. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, alarmed. "Nothing's wrong." She laughed through her tears. "That was Sterling's board, what's left of it. They want me back as CEO. To rebuild, to make things right. The shareholders are demanding it." Marcus felt his heart sink. CEO meant her old world. Her old life. It meant, "I told them no." Victoria wiped her eyes. "I told them Sterling Cruise Lines died with those 300 people. If they want to rebuild, they'll have to do it without the Sterling name." Victoria, your father's company, would have died of shame at what it became. No, I meant what I said about starting fresh. Small, right. She looked at Marcus. With the right partner, if he's still interested. Emma whooped. Does this mean we're going into the shipping business? Maybe, Marcus said, pulling both of them close. But first we need a place to live that isn't a motel, and Victoria needs lawyers for her lawsuit. And we all need about a week of sleep. Details, Victoria said, kissing him. We just brought down a giant. Everything else is details. Outside, the city went about its evening routines, unaware that in a shabby motel room, 3 people who'd found each other in tragedy were planning a future built on truth, justice, and the kind of love that grew from diving into dangerous waters to save strangers. The climax had come and gone in a flurry of legal proceedings and handcuffs. But for Marcus, the real victory was simpler. Emma safe and happy, Victoria free to be herself, and the knowledge that sometimes, against all odds, doing right triumphed over doing well. So, Victoria said, about that shipping company. I'm thinking we start with 1 boat. Nothing fancy, just something honest. The Victoria Catherine, Emma suggested, after you and Mom. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I like that. They talked late into the night, planning a future that would have seemed impossible weeks ago. The motel room that had been their bunker became their launching pad, the place where Phoenix plans rose from the ashes of everything they'd lost. Sterling Cruise Lines had taken their shot. They'd missed. Now it was time to build something better. The federal courthouse in Boston was a modern fortress of glass and steel, designed to intimidate. 6 months after the indictments, the criminal trial of United States versus Blackwood et al. Had become the most watched legal proceeding since Watergate. Marcus straightened his tie, a new one Emma had picked out, paid for with money from his job at the marina while they waited for the legal dust to settle. Beside him, Victoria looked composed but tired. The civil lawsuit from Sterling had drained her remaining resources, forcing her to sell everything. Today's the day, Thomas Chen said, reviewing his notes one final time. Your testimony will either seal their fate or give them wiggle room. No pressure. Thomas, Victoria warned. Right. Sorry, you'll be fine, Marcus. Just tell it like you told the grand jury. The courtroom was packed. Families of victims filled one section, Sterling shareholders another. The defendants sat at their table like crows on a wire, Blackwood still defiant, the others various shades of defeated. The prosecution calls Marcus Thompson. The walk to the witness stand felt both endless and too quick. Marcus placed his hand on the Bible, thinking of Mary, of the promises he'd made at her graveside, about protecting Emma and doing right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Prosecutor Sarah Martinez had become sharper. In the months of preparation, she walked Marcus through the rescue with precision, using charts and timelines to show how Sterling's negligence had created a deadly trap. Mr. Thompson, based on your experience as a ship captain, what's your assessment of the safety failures? You witnessed? Objection, Blackwood's lawyer called. The witness is not a cruise ship expert. Overruled, Judge Patricia Hawkins said firmly. The witness has 20 years of maritime experience. He may answer. Marcus chose his words carefully. In 20 years on the water, I've never seen such complete failure of basic safety protocols. It wasn't one thing going wrong. It was everything all at once, because maintenance was treated as optional. You saved 30 people that day. Could more have been saved with proper equipment? Objection! Overruled. Marcus met Blackwood's glare steadily. Yes, with working lifeboats, trained crews, proper emergency procedures, yes. Hundreds more could have lived. The defense's cross-examination was brutal. Blackwood's lawyer, a shark named Harrison Wolfe, attacked from every angle. Mr. Thompson, isn't it true you were desperate for money when you made these accusations? I was desperate for money before the rescue too. Didn't stop me from trying to save lives. You've become quite close with Miss Sterling, haven't you? Some might say intimately close? Yes. And she's worth millions? Was worth millions. Your client took care of that with the lawsuits. So you're saying you have nothing to gain from this testimony? Marcus leaned forward. I've already gained everything that matters. The truth is being told. My daughter can be proud of her father. The rest is just noise. When Victoria took the stand that afternoon, she was magnificent. Every question about safety protocols she answered with documentation. Every attempt to paint her as a disgruntled employee she countered with evidence. Ms. Sterling, Wolf. Prest, you were CEO. These alleged failures happened on your watch. Yes, Victoria said simply, and I'll carry that guilt forever. But I'm here now, telling the truth, trying to make sure it never happens again. Can your client say the same? Objection. Sustained. The prosecution then played the recordings from the board meetings. The courtroom fell silent as Blackwood's voice filled the space, calculating the cost of lives versus lawsuits. Several jurors visibly recoiled. On the third day, the prosecution presented their surprise witness, Captain Morrison's widow. She'd been found in possession of her husband's personal log, kept against company policy. He wrote about the safety concerns, she said, voice steady despite her tears. Said he'd reported problems repeatedly, but was told to stop being alarmist. The last entry, she paused, composing herself. The last entry says, if something happens, know that I tried. The defense case was built on technicalities and blame shifting. They called expert witnesses who testified about industry standards, carefully dancing around the fact that Sterling had violated even those minimal requirements. They tried to blame the captain, the crew, even the weather, but the damage was done. When Blackwood himself took the stand, his arrogance was his undoing. These were business decisions, he insisted under questioning. Difficult choices that had to be made for the company's survival. The company's survival was more important than passenger survival? Martinez asked. That's not what It's what you said in the board meeting, isn't it? The math is simple, you said. Taken out of context. Let's provide context then. Martinez pulled up a chart. This is your salary and bonuses for the past 5 years, $27 million. How much would proper maintenance have cost? Don't have those figures. $8 million total, less than a third of your personal compensation. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Marcus spent them with Emma and Victoria, trying to distract themselves with normal life. Cooking meals, helping with homework, planning their future business. When the call came, they rushed back to court, on the charge of criminal negligence. Resulting in death, the foreman read. We find the defendant Richard Blackwood guilty. 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 The word echoed through each charge, each defendant. Blackwood's face went white. Others wept. In the gallery, families of victims held each other. Judge Hawkins set sentencing for the following month. The defendants will be remanded to custody pending sentencing. Bail is revoked. Watching Blackwood led away in handcuffs was surreal. The man who'd threatened Emma, who'd destroyed their lives in pursuit of protecting his empire, reduced to a number in the federal system. Outside, the courthouse steps were chaos. Martinez fought through to reach them. You did it, she said, both of you. This verdict will change maritime safety forever. Will it bring anyone back? Victoria asked quietly. No, but it might save the next 300. Thomas appeared with more news. The civil suit against Victoria is falling apart. With the criminal convictions, Sterling's insurance company is refusing to back the lawsuit. They'll likely settle for pennies. And the victims' families? Marcus asked. The criminal verdict opens the door for massive civil suits. Sterling Cruise Lines will be bankrupt within a year. The assets will go to the families. That evening, they had a quiet celebration at a real restaurant, their first in months. Emma raised her glass of soda, to Dad, who jumped in the water, to Victoria, who told the truth, and to everyone who helped. To Captain Morrison, Victoria added, who stayed at his post. To 300 souls who deserved better. Marcus finished. They drank, and for a moment the weight of it all settled over them. Then Emma, irrepressible as always, asked, So when do we start our shipping company? Soon, Victoria promised. We've had some investors reach out, people who believe in doing things right. The Victoria Catherine, Emma pressed. If your dad agrees. Marcus looked at the two most important people in his world. 6 months ago he'd been a struggling fisherman. Now he was a man who'd helped bring down a corrupt empire, found love in the most unlikely place, and was about to start a new chapter. I was thinking, he said slowly, maybe we call it Phoenix shipping. Rising from the ashes and all that. Victoria smiled. I like it. But the first ship is still the Victoria Catherine. Deal. They talked late into the evening, planning a future built on the ruins of tragedy. The convictions wouldn't bring back the dead, but they'd shown that sometimes justice could prevail. Sometimes ordinary people could stand against giants and win. As they walked back to their apartment, a modest 2-bedroom that felt like a palace after the motel, Marcus felt Mary's ring on its chain around his neck. He liked to think she'd approve of how he'd fought, of the woman who'd joined their small family, of the future they were building. Dad, Emma said, taking his hand. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us, Marcus corrected, pulling Victoria close. With his other arm. All of us. The Phoenix was ready to rise. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the deck of a ship again. Not the Mary Catherine. She was gone forever. This was the Victoria Catherine, 42 feet of honest steel and possibility, bobbing gently at her berth in Rockport Harbor. She's beautiful, Emma said, running her hand along the freshly painted rail. Mum would have loved her. Yeah, Marcus agreed. She would have. The ship was modest by commercial standards, but perfect for their needs, a working vessel designed for small cargo runs between the coastal islands. Phoenix Shipping's first and so far only asset, purchased with investments from families who'd lost people on the celestial dream and wanted to be part of something better. Victoria emerged from the wheelhouse, grease on her cheek from helping install the new navigation system. The GPS is online. State-of-the-art, but user-friendly. Nothing like the overcomplicated systems on cruise ships. She'd thrown herself into learning the practical side of shipping with the same intensity she'd once applied to board meetings. Marcus had found her one night reading diesel engine manuals by flashlight, determined to understand every bolt and valve. Ready for the maiden voyage? Marcus asked. Our first actual paying job. Victoria grinned. Medical supplies to Pearl Island, $2,000 profit if we don't hit anything. We won't hit anything, Emma said confidently. Dad's the best, captain in Massachusetts. And Victoria's the best CEO, Marcus added. Co-CEO, Victoria corrected. Partners, remember? They'd incorporated Phoenix Shipping as equal partners, despite Victoria's larger financial contribution. She'd insisted on it, saying trust was worth more than money. The investors had agreed, drawn by the story of a company built on principles instead of just profits. Roy Hendricks ambled down the dock, chewing his eternal tobacco. Heard you got your captain's papers back, Marcus. Yesterday. Clean record. Thanks to the trial verdict? Good. Hate to see you sailing illegally. Roy studied the Victoria Catherine with a professional eye. She's solid. Bit small for what you're planning, though. We'll grow, Victoria said. Slowly, carefully, but we'll grow. Already got a second ship lined up if this run goes well. Marcus added, owners retiring, willing to sell reasonable. The Perseverance? She's a good vessel. Treat her right. Roy spat over the rail. Proud of you both. Taking something ugly and making it beautiful. That's seamanship of a different kind. As Roy wandered off, Thomas Chen arrived with final paperwork. The lawsuit against Victoria had settled for a symbolic $1. Sterling's insurance company eager to close the books. The criminal sentences had been handed down. Blackwood got 12 years, the others various lesser terms. Civil suits had indeed bankrupted Sterling Cruise Lines, its assets distributed to victims' families. Phoenix Shipping is officially cleared for operations, Thomas announced. May fair winds find you. Will you be our lawyer? Emma asked. When we're a big company. I'll be your lawyer now, Thomas smiled. Growing with good people is its own reward. That evening, they held a small ceremony on deck. No champagne bottle. Against the hull. They couldn't afford to waste good glass. Instead, Emma poured grape juice over the bow while reading something she'd written. For those who sailed and didn't return, we remember. For those who survived, we sail forward. For those who'll trust us with their cargo and lives, we promise to put safety first, always. The Victoria Catherine set sail, not for profit, but for purpose. That was beautiful, kiddo, Marcus said, voice thick. I've been practicing, Emma beamed. Victoria helped with the big words. As the sun set over Rockport Harbour, painting the water gold and crimson, the three of them stood together on their ship. Marcus thought about the journey from that terrible day when the Celestial Dream sank. The losses had been staggering. His boat, their home, 300 innocent lives. But from that tragedy had come unexpected gifts. Love, purpose, a new kind of family. Nervous about tomorrow? Victoria asked. Terrified, Marcus admitted. Running a business. Being responsible for employees. Making it all work. We'll figure it out together, she leaned against him. That's what partners do. Mum and Dad sitting in a tree, Emma sang, then dodged as both adults moved to catch her. When did she start calling you Mum? Marcus asked Victoria. Last week. I told her she didn't have to, but she said I needed a mom for the business stuff, Emma interrupted. Two parents make better partners. It's just logic. Victoria's eyes misted. Out of the mouths of babes. They stayed on deck as darkness fell, going over last-minute preparations. The medical supplies were loaded, the route planned, the weather favorable. Everything they dreamed of in that motel room was becoming real. I love you, Marcus said suddenly. Both of you. In case I don't say it enough, you say it exactly. Enough, Victoria replied. But I love you too. Both of you. Group hug, Emma declared, and they obliged, standing together on the deck of their future. The maiden voyage of the Victoria Catherine went perfectly. Marcus guided their ship through familiar waters, while Victoria managed communications with their client. Emma, on school break, charted their course and kept the log with meticulous detail. Pearl Island dead ahead, Emma announced from her position at the navigation station. 12 minutes to dock at current speed. Good eye, first mate, Marcus said, earning a proud grin. The medical supplies were desperately needed. Pearl Island's small clinic had been struggling with deliveries since the big shipping companies found the route unprofitable. Phoenix. Shipping charged fair rates, enough to sustain the business but not gouge the community. You're the company that took down Sterling, Dr. Martinez asked as they supervised the unloading. We told the truth, Victoria corrected. The justice system took them down. Well, we're grateful. Sterling used to charge us triple and deliver late half the time. The doctors shook their hands warmly. Welcome to our regular route. We'll need deliveries twice monthly. On the return trip, Victoria took the wheel under Marcus's supervision. She'd been studying for her captain's license, determined to be a true partner in every sense. Her hands were steady, her course true. Natural sailor, Marcus observed, must be all that time on cruise ships. Cruise ships are floating hotels. This, Victoria patted the wheel affectionately, this is real sailing. 2 weeks later, they were signing papers on their second vessel, the Perseverance. Roy had been right. She was a good ship, larger than the Victoria Catherine, capable of bigger loads and longer journeys. The seller, Captain Walsh, practically gave them a discount when he learned their story. About time someone put principles before profits in this business, Walsh said. You need crew? Can't afford much, Marcus began. I'll work for basic wages plus a small percentage. Been sailing these waters 40 years. Be nice to end my career with people doing it right. They hired 2 more crew members, young people from the Maritime Academy who believed in their mission. Phoenix shipping was becoming real, no longer. Just a dream born from tragedy. The wedding was small, held on the deck of the Victoria Catherine on a perfect September afternoon. Emma served as both flower girl and best person, delighted with her dual role. Roy officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for the occasion. Do you, Victoria Sterling, take this fisherman to be your husband in calm seas and storms, in profit and loss, for as long as you both shall sail? I do, Victoria said, eyes locked on Marcus. Do you, Marcus Thompson, take this CEO to be your wife, in port and at sea, in hardship and success, for as long as you both shall sail? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the Internet and the state of Massachusetts, I pronounce you partners in all things. You may kiss your bride. They kissed as the harbor seals barked approval, and their small gathering of friends, crew, investors, survivors from that terrible day, applauded. Emma threw biodegradable confetti with enthusiasm, covering them both. I now present Mr. and Mrs. Thompson Sterling, Roy announced. Or Sterling Thompson. They're still negotiating. The reception was potluck on the dock, everyone bringing something. No champagne fountains or 7-course meals, just good people sharing good food. Thomas Chen brought homemade dumplings. The crew from Perseverance contributed fresh-caught lobster. Even Diana Walsh came, bringing a cake decorated with a phoenix, rising from waves. I'm working on a book about the whole story, Diana told them. With your permission, of course. The proceeds would go to the Victims Fund. Tell the truth, Marcus said. All of it, the good and bad. As evening fell, the party moved to the Victoria Catherine's deck. Someone had brought a guitar and old sea shanties mixed with contemporary songs. Emma fell asleep against Victoria's shoulder, worn out from excitement. No honeymoon? Roy asked. We're taking the Perseverance on her first Phoenix run next week, Victoria explained. Delivering building supplies to 3 islands. That's honeymoon enough. Most people go to beaches, not deliver lumber to them. We're not most people, Marcus said, pulling his wife closer. Later, after the guests had gone and Emma was tucked into her bunk on the ship, she'd insisted on sleeping aboard for the celebration. Marcus and Victoria stood at the rail watching the harbor lights. Any regrets? Marcus asked. You could have had your company back, your fortune, your old life. That life nearly killed me inside, Victoria said. This life, our life, makes me feel alive every single day. She turned in his arms. Do you have regrets? I brought chaos to your world. You brought purpose, love, a future I couldn't have. Imagined, he kissed her forehead. The only thing I regret is that it took tragedy to bring us together. Maybe that's how the best things happen, Victoria mused. From the worst circumstances, something beautiful grows. A year ago, the celestial dream had sunk, taking 300 souls with her. That tragedy had rippled outward, destroying careers, companies, and comfortable lives. But it had also created space for truth, justice, and unexpected love. Phoenix. Shipping now had 2 ships, 4 full-time employees, and contracts with 12 island communities. They'd never be rich by traditional standards, but they were building something that mattered, a company that put people before profits, safety before stock prices. The forecast looks good for next week, Marcus said, checking his phone. Clear sailing for our honeymoon delivery run. Clear sailing, Victoria repeated, smiling at the metaphor. I like the sound of that. They stood together in the peaceful darkness, the boats rocking gently at their moorings. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances, to prove that business could be done differently. But tonight they were simply Marcus and Victoria Thompson Sterling, a fisherman and former CEO who'd found each other in the worst way possible and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The Phoenix had risen, and it was ready to soar. 1 year later, on the anniversary of the Celestial Dream tragedy, Rockport Harbor hosted a memorial service. The morning was crisp and clear, the kind of weather that made the ocean look deceptively peaceful. Marcus stood with Victoria and Emma at the harbor's edge, where a new memorial had been installed, a simple stone marker listing the names of the 312 souls lost. We gather today not just in sorrow, but in remembrance, the chaplain began, and in recognition that from tragedy can come transformation. The crowd was larger than expected, families of victims, survivors, maritime workers, and locals who'd been touched by the story. Many wore Phoenix shipping caps. The company had donated them, with proceeds going to the Maritime Safety Foundation Victoria had established. Marcus spotted familiar faces throughout the crowd. James, Victoria's former assistant, now fully recovered and working for a non-profit focused on cruise ship worker rights. Dr. Patel from the rescue, who'd become a vocal advocate for maritime safety reform. Even some of the jury members from the trial had come. "Marcus Thompson," the chaplain called. "Would you say a few words?" Marcus hadn't prepared anything, but Victoria squeezed his hand encouragingly. He made his way to the simple podium, looking out at faces that had become part of their extended family. "A year ago, I was just a fisherman trying to make ends meet," he began. "I lost my boat that day, but I gained something I didn't expect. Purpose. And a family." He glanced at Victoria and Emma. "We can't bring back those we lost, but we can honor them by doing better, by putting people first, by remembering that every life matters more than any profit margin." He talked about Phoenix Shipping's mission, about the changes in maritime law sparked by the tragedy, about the importance of ordinary people standing up to powerful interests. When he finished, the applause was subdued but heartfelt. Victoria spoke next, her voice clear and strong. "My father built Sterling Cruise Lines to bring joy to people. It lost its way, and I bear responsibility for that. But today, I want to talk about redemption, about how the worst day of our lives led to the best changes. Phoenix Shipping now employs 15 people, serves 23 communities, and has a perfect safety record. We're proof that business can be both profitable and principled." After the service, they mingled with the crowd. Richard Blackwood's daughter approached them hesitantly. Marcus tensed, but she only wanted to apologize. "My father was wrong," she said simply. "What you did, testifying, telling the truth, it was brave. Thank you. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption," Victoria replied gently. "Even your father, when he served his time." As the crowd dispersed, the Thompson-Sterling family walked to their dock. Phoenix Shipping now operated 5 vessels, each named for someone lost on the Celestial Dream. The Victoria Catherine remained their flagship, joined by the Captain Morrison, the Sarah's Dream, the Eternal Hope, and their newest acquisition, the Second Chance. "Busy day ahead," Captain Walsh said, greeting them at the operations office. "Medical supplies to Pearl Island, construction materials to Seal Cove, and that special delivery to the mainland." The special delivery was Emma's science fair project, now headed to the state finals. Her work on sustainable fishing practices had evolved into a comprehensive study of maritime environmental protection, sponsored by the Oceanographic Institute. "You sure you can't come?" Emma asked her parents for the 10th time. "Someone has to run the deliveries," Marcus said. "But Mrs. Patterson will take good care of you, and we'll be watching the live stream." "I still say we should have named a boat after your teacher," Victoria added. "She's been amazing," Emma hugged them both. "When I win, I'm going to talk about you, about how doing the right thing matters, even when it costs everything." "When you win," Marcus teased. "Pretty confident, first mate. I learned from the best." Emma grinned. As Emma left with her teacher, Marcus and Victoria did their morning rounds. Each ship had to be checked, crews briefed, manifests reviewed. It was hands-on work, different from Victoria's old life of boardrooms and spreadsheets. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, watching her check fuel gauges. "None," Victoria said firmly. "I know who I am now. More importantly, I like who I am." The radio crackled with weather updates and shipping traffic, normal sounds of a working harbour, but Marcus never took them for granted. Every safe voyage was a victory, every successful delivery a testament to their values. "Phoenix Base, this is Second Chance," came a voice over the radio. "Departing for Nantucket with medical supplies, all systems green." "Copy that, Second Chance," Victoria responded. "Fair winds and following seas." Marcus smiled at hearing her. use the traditional blessing. She'd come so far from the CEO who'd needed an inspection to see her own ship's failures. Now she knew every boat, every crew member, every route. Their office walls were covered with charts, schedules and photos. Pictures from their wedding, Emma's school achievements, crew celebrations, but the center spot was reserved for a framed photo of the Mary Catherine, the boat that had started it all. She was a good boat, Marcus said, following Victoria's gaze. She saved us all, Victoria agreed, in more ways than one. Dawn at the harbour came with the familiar cry of seagulls and the scent of salt air. Marcus stood on the deck of the Victoria Catherine, coffee in hand, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. The old compass from the Mary Catherine, salvaged from the depths by a diving team and restored, sat mounted on the wheelhouse wall, their true north, always pointing toward what mattered. "You're up early," Victoria said, joining him with her own mug. She wore work clothes and steel-toed boots, a far cry from her designer suits of the past. "Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about how different life would be if I hadn't gone out that day. No Phoenix shipping, no us. Emma wouldn't have her extended family." Victoria leaned against him. 312 people still gone, but no justice for them. Was it worth it, Marcus asked, the question that sometimes haunted him. "All the pain and loss to get here? I can't say it was worth those lives. Nothing would be." Victoria's voice was thoughtful. "But given that it happened, I think we've honored them the best way we could. By changing things, by being better." The wand radio crackled to life with the morning roll call. Each Phoenix ship checking in, reporting position and status. The Captain Morrison was halfway to Martha's Vineyard. The Sarah's Dream had just left port with supplies for a research station. The Eternal Hope was loading grain for the outer islands. The Second Chance was in dry dock for routine maintenance. "Phoenix Base, this is Emma calling from Boston." A familiar voice came through the radio. "Science fair update. We won. Repeat, we won." Marcus grabbed the microphone. "Congratulations, kiddo. We knew you would. They want to publish my research, and the Oceanographic Institute offered me a summer internship." Emma's excitement carried clearly over the waves. "I'm coming home on the noon ferry. Can we celebrate, Macca?" "And cheese," Victoria suggested, grinning. "Mac and cheese," Emma confirmed. "Love you both. Emma out." As they prepared the Victoria Catherine for the day's run, other boats were heading out too. Marcus recognized most of the captains. Some had testified at the trial, others had joined the rescue efforts that terrible day. Nods and waves were exchanged, a brotherhood forged in shared purpose. "Thompson!" Roy Hendricks called from his new boat, funded by the settlement he'd received after Sterling's shell company was exposed. "Heard Emma won the whole thing?" "News travels fast," Marcus called back. "Small harbor. Besides, she's been telling everyone for weeks she was going to win. Kids got your confidence and Victoria's brains. Dangerous combination." They made their morning run to Pearl Island, delivering not just medical supplies, but also books for the school, fresh produce for the elderly center, and mail for residents. Phoenix shipping had become more than a business. It was a lifeline, connecting communities that larger companies had abandoned. Dr. Martinez met them at the dock. "Did you hear? The new maritime safety bill passed. Mandatory maintenance schedules, increased crew training, regular inspections that actually mean something. They're calling it the Celestial Dream Act." "About time," Victoria said, "though it shouldn't take a tragedy to make people do the right thing." "Human nature," the doctor shrugged. "Sometimes we need to be shaken awake." On the return journey, Marcus let Victoria take the helm while he updated their logs. Phoenix Shipping's books were open to any investor who wanted to see them. Transparency was policy, not aspiration. They'd never be wealthy, but they were sustainable, growing steadily while maintaining their principles. "Remember when you offered me that job?" Marcus asked. "Back before everything exploded? When you barely knew me and I was keeping secrets?" "Yes, I remember." I almost said no. Seemed too good to be true. A CEO wanting to partner with a fisherman. "And now?" Now I know it was exactly as good as it seemed. Better even. He closed the logbook. We've got a good life, Victoria. A good business. A brilliant daughter, each other. We do, she agreed. My father would be proud. Your Mary would be too. They docked as the afternoon sun reached its peak. Emma was waiting on the pier, state championship trophy in hand, practically vibrating with excitement. She hugged them both fiercely. They said my research could actually influence policy about sustainable fishing and protecting the ocean while supporting fishing families. She paused for breath. Oh, and I met a boy. What? Marcus and Victoria said in unison. Kidding, Emma laughed. But your faces, I'm 13, not 30. Plenty of time for boys after I saved the oceans. They walked toward their apartment. A real house now, modest, but theirs, with a view of the harbour. Phoenix Shipping's office occupied the ground floor, their living space above. It wasn't fancy, but it was filled with love and purpose. Dad, Victoria, Emma said as they climbed the stairs. I've been thinking about the story you always tell, about the rescue and the trial and starting over. I want to write it down, all of it, so people remember not just what went wrong, but how ordinary. People can make things right. Diana's already writing, Victoria began. Diana's writing about the legal stuff. I want to write about the love stuff, about how sometimes the worst thing that happens can lead to the best thing, about how a fisherman and a CEO can build something amazing together. Marcus exchanged glances with Victoria. Their daughter, because Emma was their daughter in every way that mattered, had inherited both their strengths. His determination and her intelligence combined with a wisdom that was uniquely her own. Write it true, Marcus said. The fear, the pain, the doubt, all of it. And the hope, Victoria added. Don't forget the hope. That evening, as they sat around their kitchen table eating celebratory mac and cheese, Marcus thought about journeys. His had started as a struggling fisherman, desperate to provide for his daughter. It had taken him through loss, heroism, love, and renewal. Victoria's journey had been different but parallel, from isolated wealth to connected purpose, from CEO of a corrupt empire to co-captain of something honest and good. Emma's journey was just beginning, but already she was charting a course that would make both her mothers, the one who gave her life and the one who chose her, proud. Outside, the harbour settled into evening calm. The Phoenix shipping boats rocked gently at their moorings, ready for tomorrow's work. Somewhere out on the dark water, other ships sailed, other stories unfolded. But here, in this warm kitchen with these two people who meant everything, Marcus had found his safe harbour. To the Victoria Catherine, Emma raised her glass of milk. To the Mary Catherine, Victoria added. To Phoenix Shipping, Marcus continued. To family, they said together, and in that moment, with the past honoured and the future bright, Marcus Thompson knew that sometimes you had to lose everything to find what really mattered. He'd lost a boat, but gained a purpose. Lost his old life, but found a new family. And in the end, that trade had been worth every storm they'd weathered. The compass on the wall pointed true north, but Marcus no longer needed it. He'd found his direction in the eyes of the woman who'd chosen him and the daughter who'd made them whole. Whatever storms came next, they'd sail them together. After all, that's what families did. That's what partners did. That's what love, real love, made possible. The sun set over Rockport Harbour, painting the sky in shades of hope and memory. And in a modest house above a shipping office, three people who'd found each other in the worst of circumstances continued building the best of lives, one day, one delivery, one act of love at a time.